Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves waking up, not in a cozy, temperature-controlled bedroom, but in the gritty underbelly of Victorian London. Outside your window, if you even have one, is a thick, milky fog, clinging low over crooked rooftops and leaning chimneys. The morning light tries its best to cut through the haze, but mostly it just gives up and leaves everything painted in a yellowish gloom. It smells like yesterday's coal fires, horse droppings, and the distant tang of something rotting, probably the river. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the groaning wood of a crooked boarding house bed. The mattress sags to one side. The sheets are a suspicious shade of beige, and you're pretty sure the lump under your pillow is either a sock or something that used to be alive. Morning hasn't so much arrived as leaked in slowly, like everything else in this city. You sit up and rub the sleep from your eyes, already feeling the chill that seems to have soaked into the walls overnight. It's always damp. Even the air feels soggy, like it's been wrung out from a wet cloth. The fireplace is cold. It hasn't seen a coal in 3 days. You huddle into the same threadbare shawl you slept in, trying to will your limbs into motion without disturbing the ache in your joints. Outside, the streets are waking up too. Not with birdsong, but with cartwheels clattering over cobblestones, and the occasional shout from a fruit seller who may or may not have any actual fruit. Your breath fogs in the air as you move toward the window and push open the cracked wooden shutter. Beyond it lies a view that would terrify a modern tourist brochure: soot-blackened bricks, clotheslines sagging with questionable laundry, and smoke trailing upward, like ghosts too lazy to escape. You take a cautious sniff. The Thames is nearby. You can tell because it smells like someone spilled soup in an open grave. And that's on a good day. Victorian London's fog, for the record, isn't just fog. It's pea soup, a thick, greenish smog, born of coal smoke, river damp, and the warm exhale of 10,000 chimney stacks. On some mornings you could stretch your arm out and not see your hand. People genuinely got lost walking home from the corner pub. Historians even debate whether some of the worst London fogs were natural phenomena or man-made environmental disasters. The jury's out on how much came from the heavens and how much from chimneys. You start to dress, although dress is a generous word. It's more like layering every piece of fabric you own and hoping it counts as decent. Undergarments first, though calling them clean would be optimistic. Then a blouse that's seen too many scrubbings and a woolen skirt stiff from last week's rain. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and pin it in place with a rusting brooch. No socks, you lost one last week to a rat and your boots squelch faintly when you step into them. That's fine. The streets will do worse to them. Your breath is louder than usual in the quiet. The kind of quiet that never really settles. There's always something leaking, creaking, hissing. Water pipes gurgle overhead. Somewhere below a cat screams, unless it's a baby. It's hard to tell before breakfast. You wince and pull the scarf tighter around your neck. Most homes in your district, Whitechapel, or maybe Lambeth, share walls with neighbours. Thin walls. You can hear someone coughing behind one. A dry, persistent hack that suggests tuberculosis, or just the usual Victorian lung wreck. It's a background track to everyday life here, like the sound of coal deliveries or someone yelling thief down the alley. Through the floorboards below you hear the clatter of footsteps. Someone's already up and out, probably chasing bread or chasing work, often the same thing. Hunger waits for no one, and neither do employers. If you're late, you're fired. If you're fired, you're starved. It's a beautiful system. There's no indoor plumbing, of course. You'll have to brave the stairwell missing one-step creaks like it's haunted, and venture out into the shared courtyard for water. The pump is cold to the touch and sticks slightly when you press it down. It coughs out a spurt of brownish liquid that you'll boil later and pretend is tea. Back upstairs, a rat scampers across the sill and vanishes into a wall cavity with the confidence of a long-term tenant. You make a mental note to name it if it comes back. Something cheerful, like debt. Despite the gloom, there's a strange sort of rhythm to it all, a pace. The slow churn of life under chimney smoke and endless grey. You can almost hear it, the rise and fall of footsteps on stone, the splash of boots through puddles, the flap of wet laundry in the stale wind. Everyone's surviving in slow motion, and somehow, so are you. Some historians argue the atmosphere of Victorian London was one of both decay and invention. While the poor slog through filth and disease, The rich tinkered with early science, experimenting with gaslight, sewage systems, even telegraphs. But experts still debate whether these advancements actually helped the masses or simply widened the gulf between social classes. The rich got bell pulls and fresh towels. The poor got cholera. You glance at the sky not because you're hoping for sun that would be madness, but because you're trying to guess what sort of grey today will be. Dark grey, sickly grey, with a dash of brown. Either way, it'll match your outfit. The day has officially begun. You descend the stairs like someone sneaking through a trapdoor into another world, a world full of groaning timber, dripping pipes, and last night's regrets. One of your boots sticks slightly to something you'd rather not examine. The hallway is narrow, the walls damp and buckled like old paper, and you briefly consider whether this building might collapse in your lifetime. Odds are high. Outside, the air hits you like a wet slap. A sour blend of coal smoke, damp brick, rotting fish, and manure curls into your nostrils. It's somehow both too thick to breathe and too thin to satisfy. The fog today is what locals fondly call medium choking, meaning you'll only trip over 3 or 4 unseen objects on your way down the street. Better than yesterday when a man walked into a lamppost so hard he claimed it stole his watch. Before you can begin your journey through this colourless maze, you need to do the one thing that will make or break your survival dress properly. And we're not just talking about warmth. No, this is Victorian London, where clothes are your armour against the cold, the class system, and the gazes of strangers who will absolutely judge you by the state of your hemline. First, another layer. A second shawl still damp from last night, which you drape with the elegance of a tired cat. Then gloves. Well, one glove and a sock. They match in spirit, if not in fabric. You pin your bonnet into place using the last hairpin that hasn't gone rusty. It tilts slightly, but at least it hides the frizz. For now. Your neighbour, Mrs. Pritchard, is already outside. She's wrapped in more fabric than a small tent and stares at you like you've just emerged from the Thames. "Bit thin, aren't you, love?" she mutters. You nod respectfully. There's no comeback to that. She's not wrong. The cobblestones beneath your feet are slick, with a mixture of last night's rainhorse urine and a generous sprinkle of soot. You step carefully, pretending not to notice the puddle that looks suspiciously alive. A man in a stovepipe hat marches past you with the determination of someone who owns both socks and opinions. He doesn't glance your way. As you walk, your breath curls visibly in front of you, a ghost that follows your every step. The scarf it took you 5 winters to knit keeps slipping off your shoulder, and your elbows ache from the cold. You pass a ragged woman curled in the corner of a doorway, her eyes open but unfocused. You leave a crust of bread beside her. It's not kindness exactly, it's what people do, because they know tomorrow that could be them. Victorians were obsessed with layers of fabric, of manners of meaning. Fashion wasn't just about looking good, it was about showing you belonged. Each item of clothing sent signals: a lace-trimmed middle class, sturdy boots, working girl, mud-stained hem, probably not someone you'd invite to tea. Scholars remain divided on whether these distinctions created social mobility or just reinforced rigid class walls disguised as corsets. Speaking of corsets, be grateful you're not wearing one. That might be the only luxury you afford today. Many women do, though, yanked so tight they can't sneeze without passing out. All in the name of modesty and good posture. It's hard to rebel when your lungs are folded in half. You make it down the main road, passing shop windows filled with promises you'll never afford a glimmering bottle of cologne that smells like oranges and regret, a pair of leather gloves sitting like royalty behind glass, a meat pie so large it looks practically fictional. Your stomach growls, unimpressed with your imagination. From an alleyway, a sound catches your ear. Not the usual cough or shuffle, but something more rhythmic. Tap, tap. A boy no older than 10 sweeps the steps of a tailor's shop, his broom barely larger than his forearm. He grins at you with a gap-toothed smile. "Mornin', miss." You nod. Behind his grin is the deep cough of a child who hasn't had clean air since birth. You move along, scarf tighter now, hands in your sleeves, mind wandering toward food, or the idea of food, or the warmth that food implies. And that's when it hits you: breakfast. You forgot breakfast. You mentally inventory your options. There's cold bread back at the flat, possibly sporting a greenish tint of culinary rebellion. Or the pub at the corner might still be serving something they call oatmeal but resembles lukewarm cement. You opt for the latter. After all, the pub has benches and people and maybe, just maybe, a fire. Inside, the warmth is immediate if patchy. The fire flickers under a copper kettle that probably hasn't been washed since the Crimean War. You order the cheapest thing, a tin bowl of porridge with more water than oat and a cup of tea that tastes faintly of metal and despair. A slice of apple floats in the tea bonus. You eat slowly, savouring each bite like it might have a plot twist. A man 2 tables over is snoring softly into his pint. Another is arguing that Queen Victoria is secretly a man, which gets a few tired chuckles. The woman behind the counter watches everyone with the silent judgment of someone who's seen things, mostly unpaid tabs. At this point, let's pause for a tiny moment of nighttime magic. If you've made it this far and your eyelids are getting heavy, or your imagination is just starting to warm, whisper 1 in the comments below if this tale charms your heart, or 2 if it sends shivers down your spine. I'd love to know what kind of journey we're taking together tonight. Back in the pub, you scrape the last bit of porridge from the bowl, every bite laced with steam and soot. It's not good, but it's warm, and that makes it luxury. You pay in coins so thin they look more like buttons and head back into the fog, your body a little heavier but your steps a little firmer. And now it's time to find a lavatory. It hits you halfway down the alley, the inevitable consequence of thin porridge and yesterday's tea. The realization settles with a dull urgency in your gut: you need a toilet. Unfortunately, Victorian London does not believe in such luxuries. Toilets, at least, the kind with doors and plumbing, are reserved for the upper crust of society. The rest of you make do with alternative arrangements. Your best hope is the shared privy behind the butcher's shop, assuming it hasn't frozen over or been claimed by something with fur and too many teeth. You move quickly now, the cold sharper with each step. The fog doesn't help, it clings to you, turning lampposts into ghosts and gutters into traps. Somewhere, someone is playing a harmonica off-key. You try not to take it personally. You reach the alley behind the butcher's, passing a door where flies loiter year-round. The privy is exactly as you remember it. A wooden box that leans slightly left, as though even it has lost faith. You yank open the door, and are greeted by a scent that could be bottled and sold as despair number 5. There's no seat, just a plank with a hole, and the grim resolve of every soul who came before you. You crouch, breathe through your mouth, and pretend for a moment you're elsewhere, anywhere. A warm seaside town, perhaps, one with lemons and plumbing. Victorian sanitation was a marvel of contradiction. On the one hand, great minds were debating citywide sewer systems. On the other, most people were still flinging waste into the streets. The infamous Great Stink of 1858, when the Thames itself rebelled against being used as a toilet, finally pushed Parliament to act. But experts still debate whether it was public health concern or just the smell drifting into Westminster that forced their hand. Back in the present, you finish your business and shuffle away from the privy like a prisoner released from solitary. There's a trough nearby meant for horses but adaptable. You wash your hands in icy water that smells faintly of cabbage and something less identifiable. The soap is a shared sliver, more suggestion than substance, but you do your best. You rejoin the flow of foot traffic on the main road. There's a rhythm to it now. The clop of hooves, the roll of wheels, the squish of something unpleasant beneath your boot. You blend in, a figure among many, part of the living river that pulses through the city's cobbled arteries. You pass a row of tenements where laundry flaps defiantly in the breeze. A woman leans out and hurls a bucket of something down onto the street. It splashes perilously close to a constable who mutters and hurries on. You look up and dodge instinctively as a chamber pot empties from above. The contents hit the street with a splat, joining the city's vast invisible stew. Gardez-vous, the voice shouts belatedly from the window. A warning, technically. In theory, London had laws against such practices. In practice, enforcement was optional. People had routines. You learn to step lightly, listen closely, and never trust a quiet window. Further down the street, you spot a public convenience newly installed and gleaming in its cast-iron pride. It costs a penny to enter, and a line of men already snakes down the sidewalk. You eye it longingly, then glance at the pennies in your pocket. One buys bread, one buys warmth, one buys relief. Today, you chose porridge. Besides, for women, it's more complicated. Victorian society preferred to pretend women simply didn't need to relieve themselves. Public toilets for women were rare, tucked in corners, and sometimes protested outright by those who feared indecency. Scholars remain divided on whether this absence was due to architectural oversight, moral panic, or sheer male ignorance. Likely all three. You decide to walk it off. Motion helps, and there's still so much to do before dusk. Your stomach growls again as if trying to distract you from the chill settling into your bones. You pass a boy dragging a wooden cart with a single cabbage and a very sleepy-looking goose inside. He gives you a nod, like a fellow soldier. You return it. At a street corner, a man in a bowler hat is arguing with a woman in a bonnet, something about rent and a broken stove. Their words blend into the city's background noise bells from the tram line coughing a distant crash. You pull your shawl tighter. Everything is always breaking here: stoves, shoes, families. Just past the iron railings of a city park, mostly mud with aspirations, you spot a welcome distraction, a bookstall. The owner is slumped in a chair, his nose tucked into a yellowed pamphlet. You browse quickly, fingers tingling from the cold. The pages smell of mildew and ink. You pick up a penny novel with a lurid cover, The Butcher of Bermondsey. The woman illustrated on the front is wearing far fewer layers than anyone in real life. Artistic license. You don't buy it, but it's nice to pretend. Reading was for many the only escape that didn't cost anything but time and a bit of imagination. Literacy was rising in the Victorian age, thanks in part to compulsory education. But still, books were a luxury for most. Cheap papers and serialized fiction offered a window into another world, even if that world involved vampire nannies and haunted corsets. Your fingers are numb now, and your shoes are beginning to soak through. You keep moving. London doesn't wait. It doesn't ask if you slept well, or if your boots are dry, or if the cold is eating your spine. It simply moves forward, and you'd best keep up, or be trampled. You press on toward the market fog, curling around your legs, each breath a small cloud of persistence. You shuffle forward into the swirl of morning bustle, if you can call it that, toward the market square. It's more of a lurching, jostling stream of humanity than anything so organized. The fog is lighter here, beaten back by the sheer body heat of a dozen hucksters yelling about eels, spoons, soap and socks that may have been washed this decade. The cobblestones under your feet are slick again, always slick, always betraying you. You nearly stumble into a barrow stacked high with turnips. The vendor gives you a look that could blister paint. You nod politely and pretend you're not still dreaming about the slice of pie you saw in that pub window earlier. Victorian London's markets are equal parts miracle and menace. You can find everything here if you're quick, careful, and keep one hand on your purse at all times. Turn your back, and someone might relieve you of your week's wages, or worse, relieve themselves into your pocket. One woman once claimed to have discovered a pigeon living in her cloak after brushing too close to a poultry cart. You pass a fishmonger with slabs of questionable cod and a toothless grin. He waves at you with a hand that's definitely touched something slimy and unholy. The smell is biblical. His stand is flanked by crates of kippers, each one staring up like it died full of regrets. You hurry on. A stall catches your eye: soap, or what claims to be soap. The vendor gestures toward a lumpy collection of beige bricks shaped vaguely like angry marshmallows. Best lye in London, he proclaims. You raise an eyebrow. Lye, of course, can clean. It can also burn the skin clean off your hands. The price is suspiciously low. You pass again. Personal hygiene in this era is negotiable. Cleanliness is expensive, and water often comes from the same pipe that feeds both laundry and livestock. Baths are rare. Public bathhouses exist, yes, but you might come out with more itches than you walked in with. And the soap? Mostly animal fat and mystery. Experts still debate whether the average Victorian citizen truly smelled worse than people today, or if our standards for pleasant were just far more forgiving. The jury's still out, and maybe avoiding the courtroom entirely. You pause for a moment to look at yourself in the reflection of a fogged-over window pane. The bonnet's holding. The shawl makes you look like a sofa, but you're presentable enough, and still upright. That counts. And then it happens. A sudden bump from behind. You stagger instinctively, clutching at your pocket. Too late. The pickpocket is gone, vanished into the crowd like a ghost in suspenders. You whirl around, but all you see are hats and backs. That was your last halfpenny, gone in the space of a breath. Your first thought is panic. Your second thought is rage. Your third thought is far more pressing. You still haven't visited a proper toilet, and now you can't afford the public one even if you wanted to. Deep breath. In, out. Okay, you tell yourself. You've survived worse. That time a pigeon exploded above you during a funeral. That winter, your window froze shut from the inside. This is just another test from the city. A grumpy pop quiz on surviving with nothing. You pivot heart racing but face calm and start walking again. Head down, step steady. Because showing weakness on these streets is like offering tea to a rat. They'll take it, and then they'll come back with friends. You duck into a narrow alley to compose yourself. It's quiet here. Quiet enough to hear the drip, drip, drip of a broken pipe and the low purr of a cat sunning itself on a windowsill. The smell is less kind. Rotting fruit, damp stone, possibly a forgotten fish. A chalkboard sign leans against the wall, pointing toward Miss Pottle's laudanum and lavender remedies. Tempting. But you remember last time. You woke up 2 days later, convinced you were married to a coat rack. You keep walking. A soft cough behind you. You turn to see a little girl, barefoot hair, a tangle of string cheeks, the colour of chalk. She holds out a wilted flower and says, "Threepence, miss." You shake your head. Her face doesn't change. She nods, once solemn as a priest, and walks on. These encounters, fleeting, poignant, are the heartbeat of the city. They come and go like steam over cobblestones, each one a whisper of a life that brushes yours before vanishing into the smoke. A gust of wind pushes through the alley and sends your scarf flapping like a flag of surrender. You reach for it, fingers fumbling, and finally manage to pin it back down. That's when you notice the building ahead, a tea house. Dim light, wooden door, a chalkboard promising warmth and biscuits of varying freshness. You step inside out of the fog. The air is thick with tannin dust and something vaguely floral. The tea is half the price of the pubs, and the fire here is real. You cradle a chipped mug, watching the steam rise like a promise you're not sure you believe in. You sip. It's bitter, too strong, possibly brewed in the same kettle they use to dye socks, but it's hot. 2 women are whispering near the fireplace. One gasps and fans herself dramatically. You catch a few words. Scandal, corset, chimney sweep. You smile faintly. The real news never makes the headlines. It's passed around in shops, on corners, in tea-steeped conspiracies. At your table, a young man scribbles furiously into a notebook, muttering something about a revolutionary device to detect miasma. You consider asking what miasma smells like, but let him enjoy his moment. Scholars remain divided on whether early public health ideas, miasma theory for instance, helped or hindered sanitation. Some argue it led to reforms. Others say it just encouraged people to burn more incense. You finish your tea and stretch muscles still stiff from the cold and the tension of being constantly alert. One foot still aches from stepping into something best left unnamed. But for now, you're warm, slightly full, still breathing. And hey, if you've enjoyed these few minutes wandering the smoky maze of Victorian life, why not tap 3 in the comments if this story makes you smile, or 4 if it leaves you chilled. Either way, you're doing better than half the city. And that's something worth holding on to. You step back into the fog. It's waiting, patient as always. The fog greets you like an old friend, with bad breath, cloying damp, and unreasonably affectionate. It slips under your collar and into your sleeves, curling around your ankles with a persistence that would almost be admirable if it weren't so wet. You pull your shawl tighter, a reflex at this point, and set off toward your next goal, surviving the walk without becoming one with the horse dung. You dodge a passing carriage that seems committed to mowing down pedestrians as a lifestyle choice. The driver curses in a thick accent, tips his hat sarcastically, and disappears in a blur of rattling wheels and airborne filth. A nearby fruit stand loses an apple to the gust. The apple rolls toward you, then bounces into a gutter with a splash that suggests it will not be returning. You tread carefully, not out of politeness, out of pure, self-preserving terror. The streets are a mosaic of cobbles, sludge, and surprises. Horse droppings are everywhere. So are puddles that shimmer with oil blood or something in between. Children play in alleyways with hoops and sticks, somehow managing to ignore the constant threat of tetanus beneath their feet. Victorian London didn't have garbage trucks in the way we know them today. Rubbish collection was sporadic at best, and much of the cleaning was left to crossing sweepers, of people, often children, who'd clear a small path across the street for a penny. You pass one now, a boy no older than 7, dragging a broom nearly his size. He looks up, face smudged with soot, and grins. You drop a crust of bread into his bucket. He nods solemnly, like you've just settled a debt. As you round the corner toward the bridge, the smell intensifies. This is the part of the city where the Thames becomes more myth than river, an ooze of industrial runoff, rotting things, and ghosts of fish who died angry. Steam rises in patches from drains mixing with the fog to form a vapour that might be partly sentient. Historians still debate whether the foulness of Victorian London streets was inevitable or made worse by rapid urban sprawl and poor planning. Whatever the reason, the result is that your boots now squelch with every step like two disappointed frogs. You pass a shop selling boot scrapers shaped like lions. Ironic. Nothing majestic survives these pavements. Your own boots are scuffed damp and just beginning to separate at the toe like they're trying to escape from your feet. Someone sneezes behind you. You instinctively move faster. Not because of germs, you don't know what those are yet, but because a sneeze is often followed by a request for something: money, food, time, or your attention, all of which are in short supply today. A man approaches you suddenly, his hat tipped, low eyes darting. He holds out a pamphlet with the enthusiasm of someone selling snake oil. "Madam, may I interest you in the latest theory on phrenological salvation?" You blink. He gestures wildly to a diagram of a head with lines drawn across the scalp like a bizarre railway map. You mumble something about needing to feed your invisible ferret and slip away. Phrenology, the belief that skull shape determines personality, was wildly popular at this time. A fascinating mix of pseudoscience and social control, it was used to justify everything from hiring practices to moral judgments. Experts today roll their eyes, but in your world, it's just another curious belief, competing with leeches, ghosts, and tonic water as medical solutions. You duck down a narrower lane where the fog thickens again, this time mixed with chimney smoke. The soot here clings to everything: doors, windows, even cats. A tabby with half an ear glares at you from a windowsill, looking like it's seen things it will never unsee. Suddenly you hear shouting. Two men, red-faced and breathless, are chasing someone down the street. A pickpocket, you guess. Maybe the one who got you earlier. The thief turns sharply into a side alley and vanishes like fog into fog. No one wins. No one ever does. You pause to breathe, but the air isn't much help. It tastes like coal and regret. You lean against a lamppost for a moment until you notice it's sticky. Of course it is. Everything is sticky. Even the air feels like it's been coughed on by a chimney. You press on because what else can you do? You've already survived. One puddle with floating mysteries, 2 verbal assaults by fishmongers, and a brief encounter with a man who may or may not have been trying to marry you on the spot. You pass a street preacher, standing on an upturned crate, shouting about fire and brimstone and the moral dangers of playing cards on Sundays. His beard shakes with every syllable. A crowd gathers, half amused, half terrified. You blend into the edge of it, watching. The preacher raises a Bible and begins coughing violently. Someone hands him a ladle of water. He thanks them, and then continues yelling about the devil's interest in tight corsets. Behind you, a cart lumbers past carrying barrels labelled fertilizer. You know better. One bounces slightly. You step away before you learn more. The street opens up again into a square. A rare patch of dry pavement catches your eye like a mirage. You step onto it relieved and sit on a stone bench. The cold seeps into your thighs immediately, but you don't care. Sitting is a gift. Sitting means your feet stop throbbing. For a moment, all you hear is the distant clanging of a bell, the shuffle of boots, and the endless whisper of fog brushing against brick. You look up and smile faintly, because against all odds, against all soot and stink and slipperiness, you've made it through the morning in Victorian London without falling into a dung pile. Not a victory, perhaps, but certainly a triumph. Your rest on the cold stone bench is brief, because nothing in Victorian London stays comfortable for long. The fog thickens again, as if offended that you dared pause. A nearby church bell tolls noon, the sound warbling through the thick air, like a memory struggling to be heard. Your bones ache. Your stomach protests the betrayal of thin porridge. And the soles of your feet, soaked and soft, have started to whisper dark things about infection. But you rise, because you must. Because no one in this city waits for you. Not the milk cart, not the landlord, and certainly not the filth piling up in the gutters. You shuffle toward the sound of voices. Up ahead, a queue is forming outside the local parish workhouse. You stop short not because you're interested in entering, but because you need to see it again. Just to remind yourself what not surviving looks like. The workhouse looms like a prison built by someone who thought prisons were too cheerful. Grey stone walls, bars on windows, a smell of bleach and boiled failure. You watch the people lining up, old men with eyes like cracked glass mothers with babies bundled in rags, boys too thin for their jackets. The workhouse was meant to be a safety net. It's more like a spider web. Once you're caught getting out is a miracle. You trade your name for a number, your clothes for a uniform, and your freedom for boiled cabbage and hard labor. Historians argue whether these institutions truly helped the poor or simply punished them for existing. Scholars remain divided on whether the system was broken from birth or slowly warped by bureaucracy and fear. You take a step closer. A man with a clipboard looks you over. Name, he asks, already bored. No, thank you, you murmur, backing away like it's on fire. Because even in this world, even with empty pockets and sore feet, you're not ready for that level of surrender. You retreat down a side street where the air smells slightly less tragic. Children play in the shadows hopscotch drawn in chalk on the brick wall, a game of jacks involving actual pebbles. Their laughter echoes strangely like it's being stolen by the fog. You pass a baker's shop, tiny, warm, radiating the sweet smell of sugar and yeast. The window steams with every fresh tray of buns. You pause, pretending to study the display. Just inside, a girl, no older than 12, sweeps flour into a pile. Her sleeves are rolled up, her eyes are red-rimmed. She hums softly. And that's when it strikes you she's been working since dawn. Probably before. No school, no rest. Just bread and dust and routine. Child labour is everywhere here. Not hidden, not even whispered about. It's a feature, not a bug. Chimney sweeps, match girls, street sellers, and factory hands. Many start working as soon as they can stand. Some don't live to be teenagers. The Factory Act exists, sure, but enforcement is like fog, present in theory, patchy in practice. Experts still debate whether the slow improvements in labour law were driven by compassion or embarrassment in front of foreign dignitaries. You move on. You can't buy a bun anyway. A street musician catches your ear next, a violinist coat, too big for his frame bow, dancing like smoke across the strings. The tune is soft and sad, and just slightly off-key. You drop a button into his cap. He nods in thanks without pausing. Near him a woman stands selling violets. She calls out mechanically, voice raw, 3 blooms a penny too for the miserable. You don't have a penny, but you smile. She winks. Moments like this are London's mercy. Small, strange, brief flickers of humanity. A joke in the muck, a flower in the ash, a smile without expectation. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a man in a tall hat who clearly hasn't smiled in decades. He scowls, mutters something about social decay, and disappears with the speed of the morally outraged. You exhale, shoulders dropping. There's a bench nearby, a wooden one this time, slightly less damp. You sit again, and for a moment you imagine what it might be like to escape all this. To wake in a clean room with fresh linen and warm hands wrapping yours, and then someone sneezes behind you. Of course, you rise and keep walking because in this city, rest is borrowed time. You pass another alley, this one quieter, almost serene. You pause at its mouth. A painted sign hangs above a narrow door, the clean hands mission for the industrious poor. You snort. The door opens, and a woman in a bonnet peeks out. We have soup, she says, her voice warm. And a comb. Your eyes widen. A comb. Real soup. You step inside. It's small, cluttered, and full of steam. Bowls clink. A girl offers you a seat beside a fire that fights valiantly against the damp. You cradle the bowl she gives you like treasure. The soup is mostly water, but it has flavour. There's a sliver of carrot, a ghost of meat. The spoon is dented, but the warmth spreads all the way to your fingers. You eat slowly, savouring every bite like it might vanish if you blink. Around you, people sit in silence, grateful, weary, and momentarily safe. You spot the comb on the shelf. A real one, not made of bone. You make a note to ask for it before you leave. Someone sneezes again. You don't even flinch this time. You step out of the mission house and back into the damp breath of the city, your belly just full enough to make the cold feel cruel again. The soup clings to your ribs like hope, and the borrowed comb, currently hidden in your pocket like a contraband relic, tugs at you with a strange weight. You haven't combed your hair in weeks, maybe longer. Time blurs when every day begins with a shiver and ends with soot. The fog has lifted a little. Not much, but just enough to reveal more of London's architecture in all its decaying glory. Buildings loom like weary guardians, grey, crumbling and leaning, as if they're gossiping about the people below. You turn onto a main thoroughfare where the buildings grow taller and the boots grow shinier. You're heading west now toward the city's respectable heart, or what it pretends is a heart. The streets here are wider, the fog thinner, the trash piles smaller and more discreet, but you can still feel the filth pressing in just with better manners. You step aside for a passing gentleman, his coat crisp, and his expression carved from marble. He doesn't look at you, not even a glance, as if his eyes have been trained not to acknowledge anyone not polished enough to reflect gaslight. You walk slower here, not by choice, but because you must study everything. Every brick, every stoop, every footstep must be considered. This isn't your part of town, and it shows. People here wear gloves for fashion, not necessity. Their scarves match their hats, and their shoes don't squelch. You step in a puddle and try not to flinch. Just ahead, a set of boys in smart uniforms stroll past. Students likely. You catch a few phrases. Latin verbs, something about the empire, and one insult disguised as a compliment. They look about your age, though. You'd guess their fingers have never bled from frostbite. One of them bumps you lightly without apology. You feel like a shadow drifting between lives that don't recognize your shape. You spot a newspaper boy on the corner calling out headlines. Cholera cases down in Southwark Queen reportedly unamused by sculpture scandal. He waves a folded copy at a man in a bowler who ignores him. You smile faintly. He reminds you of your brother, or the memory of him anyway. Sharp eyes, quick tongue shoes with holes. You keep walking, drawn toward the scent of roasting chestnuts. The vendor stands beside a barrel stove, flipping the nuts with practiced flair. You pause. He sees your hesitation and grins. First one's free, if you can guess my name, he offers. You raise an eyebrow. Alfred, you guess. He laughs. Close, it's Albert. He tosses you a warm chestnut. You catch it awkwardly and mumble thanks. It burns your fingers slightly, but the warmth is worth it. The flavor is sweet and smoky, and you try not to eat it too fast. Moments like these are rare and should be drawn out like lullabies. As you chew, you look up and realize you're near one of London's many churches. St. Martin's, you think, or maybe St. Giles. It's hard to keep them straight when most look like wedding cakes left out in the rain. But the bell tower is striking and people stream in and out like it's market day. Curious, you wander closer. Inside, the air is warmer, candles flicker, and the scent of wax and worn hymnals drapes across your shoulders like a shawl. You slip into a back pew and sit quietly. No one notices, or if they do, they pretend not to, which is just as good. A man at the pulpit reads aloud in a voice trained for acoustics, not compassion. Something about charity. Something about the blessed poor. You look around and wonder if he's ever missed a meal, or washed his hands in a horse trough. Victorian religion is everywhere, stitched into law, sewn into schools, engraved on soup kitchens. But for many, it's less about faith and more about survival. You show up, you sing the hymn, you get your bread ration. Experts still debate whether the church genuinely uplifted the poor or simply managed their behavior with sermons and soup. You're not here for answers, just for warmth. The hymn ends. You stand and slip out quietly, nodding to a woman in a lace cap who pretends not to see you. Back outside, the fog has returned with a shrug. It wraps around the church like a cat settling in for a nap. You breathe in and cough once, not the worst you've had today. A horse-drawn cart trundles past, overloaded with crates of potatoes. One topples and rolls toward you. You catch it barely and hand it back to the driver, who grunts something unintelligible in return. You wonder if you could have kept it, maybe turned it into soup, or warmth, or a pillow. As you walk on, you pass a woman yelling at a constable, gesturing wildly at a dog. The dog barks unimpressed. You don't stop. London drama is endless and exhausting. The light is shifting now. Shadows stretch longer. The fog turns golden, then grey again. The day is aging, and so are your legs. Your feet ache with the promise of blisters. Your stomach makes a new demand. And your hands, though warmer, tremble just slightly from fatigue. Still you smile. You've made it farther west than you thought you would today. Past the slums, through the maze of smoke and soot and judgment. You're not cleaner, you're not richer, but you're still upright. That counts. You cut back eastward before the sun fully commits to setting, because no one in their right mind stays in the posh districts of London too long if they can't afford to buy a chair there. The streets begin to narrow again. The buildings slope inward as though gossiping behind your back, and the fog thickens as always, like it's jealous of the light. You pass a row of chimney stacks belching black smoke into the grey sky. At least a dozen rooftops seem to groan under the weight of soot and time. And then you see it, a thin figure scuttling across one rooftop, disappearing into a hole barely wider than a book. A chimney sweep, or rather a child sweep. You stop, watch. The boy emerges again a few moments later, coughing violently, dragging behind him a metal brush twice his size. His skin is the colour of fireplace ash, his shirt more whole than fabric. He glances down at the street, sees you watching, and offers a toothless grin. Then he disappears again, like a shadow swallowed by brick. It's strange how normal it feels. Children crawling through flues, scraping soot from brick walls with lungs that barely work. It's not unusual. It's expected. Victorian families often sold their sons into the sweep trade as young as 4. They were cheaper, smaller, and let's be honest, more expendable. Some didn't make it out. Others got stuck and simply stayed there until someone noticed the smell. You continue walking with the image of the soot boy still clinging to your thoughts. You feel his cough in your own lungs, taste coal dust in your mouth, even though you've never been up a flue. At least not yet. Experts still debate whether chimney sweeping was the most dangerous job for children during the period, or simply the most visible one. Some argue mudlarks and matchgirls suffered worse fates, but no one forgets the image of a child squeezed into a chimney, scraping for pennies and praying to not become part of the house. You duck under an awning as rain begins to fall, not proper rain, but that steady, grim drizzle that feels like being spit on by a sky too bored to storm. The droplets mix with the soot on your face and make little rivers of grime. You wipe them away pointlessly. You round a corner and find yourself beside a pub. The black cauldron says, the sign swinging on iron hinges. A group of men stands outside smoking pipes and laughing like they haven't been cold in years. One of them flicks ash into the gutter, another spits. The third watches you with a look that suggests he's only half joking when he says, "Smile, love." You'll wrinkle if you scowl too long. You keep walking. Smiling at strangers, especially strangers with pipe ash in their beards, rarely ends well. A little farther down you find a bakery, or what's left of one. The window's cracked, and inside you can see shelves of burnt crusts and yesterday's loaves. A boy sweeps the floor, and an older woman glares at him like he stole her flour. You pass it by, though your stomach growls again, long, low, and resentful. You whisper to it to behave. It ignores you as usual. You hear a clatter behind you, wood on stone. You turn to see a sweep boy again. Not the one from before. This one is even younger. He's sitting in the gutter legs, stretched out, trying to unstick a boot that seems determined to remain part of the city. His hands are black. His nose is bleeding. No one stops. You do. He blinks at you through a curtain of coal dust. You reach into your coat pocket, find the half of a biscuit you forgot about, and press it into his hand. He stares at it like you've handed him the moon. "Don't eat it too fast," you murmur. "It'll last longer." He nods solemnly. You walk away before he can say thank you. You don't need to hear it. Some things aren't for pride. Some things are just because you can. As you cross the next intersection, the air changes again, sharper, thinner, like someone is scraping the sky. You're getting closer to the industrial quarter now. You can hear it before you see it. The rhythmic pounding of hammers, the high whine of metal on metal, the deep echoing groans of machines that eat men's hours and spit out smoke. You pass another child, this one hauling a cart of coal chunks through a side street. His face streaked with white lines where the soot hasn't touched. He's singing, a cheerful tune. You don't know the words, but the melody sticks. Just ahead you see a factory gate. Tall iron permanently ajar. Inside, a whistle blows and a swarm of people spills out, women in aprons. Boys in caps, men with slumped shoulders and sunken eyes. Some laugh. Most don't. The factory work is relentless, monotonous, dangerous. A slip of the hand can mean a finger or a whole arm. And for what? A few shillings a week, just enough to survive. Just enough to come back and do it all again. Historians argue whether Victorian industry was progress or punishment. Whether it built empires, or just crushed spines under spinning wheels. The truth, probably both. You step aside to let the workers pass. One woman nods to you. You nod back. You spot a sign nailed to the wall just beyond the gate. Help wanted. Light hands preferred. You laugh under your breath. That means children. They won't say it out loud, but everyone knows. Light hands, small arms, no unions. The rain picks up again, heavier this time. Your shoulders sag under the weight of damp wool. You find a dry spot beneath a shop awning and wait. And just for a moment, just a sliver of time, you close your eyes. You think about the chimney boy, about the biscuit, about the factory. You think about the choices no one gets to make. The roads you walk not because you chose them, but because they're the only ones open. And then the moment passes. You open your eyes. The fog hasn't cleared. The sky hasn't brightened. But you're still standing. And for now, that's enough. You make your way eastward now, deeper into the bones of the city where things rot slowly and the smells linger like memories. You're following the scent of something sharp, vinegar, salt, maybe the faint tang of old onions. It leads you toward the edge of the market district where the air pulses with shouted prices and sizzling oil. Welcome to the street food quarter. If you're lucky, you might find a pie seller today. If you're really lucky, you won't think too hard about what's in the pie. The first stall you come to advertises itself with bold lettering, mutton and kidney fresh this morning. You peer at the bubbling pot on the brazier and wonder how many mornings ago this morning happened. A woman stands behind it, ladling out meat chunks into flaky pastry shells. She sees your hesitation and offers a smile with one gold tooth and several missing ones. Half price if you eat it with your eyes shut, she jokes. You pass. Victorian street food is equal parts adventure and risk. If it's hot, it's edible. If it's cold, it might be revenge. Popular delicacies include jellied eels, sheep's trotters, and if you're really desperate, mystery meat pies which are exactly as ambiguous as they sound. Scholars remain divided on whether these food items provided genuine sustenance or simply distracted the poor long enough to forget how hungry they still were afterward. You step aside for a cart loaded with boiled potatoes. The vendor steams in the chill, his breath and his cart blending into a misty cloud. 1 halfpenny for 2, he shouts. You search your pockets instinctively. Nothing. Well, almost nothing. The comb. You run a thumb along the teeth of it and sigh. No use trading hygiene for root vegetables. Not today. Further down, a boy with a tray strapped to his chest calls out, "Treacle tarts." Still warm. Almost sugar. He looks at you like he can smell your hesitation. You move on. Treacle is just molasses' bitter cousin, and you're not in the mood to chew on disappointment. Your stomach complains, loudly. A woman near you hears it and smirks. "Could try the peppered tripe," she suggests, gesturing toward a stand emitting thick white smoke. You raise an eyebrow. "Is it actual tripe?" She shrugs. "It's peppered. That's not a yes." You pass more carts, roasted chestnuts, pickled eggs, something labelled fish. Delight that you're fairly certain is neither. There's even a man selling ice cream, if you can believe it, in the middle of winter. His cart says, "Mrs. Marshall's Frozen Treats. Pure milk." But you've heard rumours that it's not milk at all. Just shaved ice lard and hope. Still, it draws a crowd. Children mostly, some adults pretending they're buying for children. A dog wanders through the throng looking more well-fed than most of the people. It sniffs around, then sits patiently beside a sausage stand. The vendor feeds it a scrap without looking. The dog wags its tail once and trots off. You continue weaving through the chaos, catching fragments of conversations. Told her not to marry a coal man, gave her 12 pence for a dress she made of rags, and then the eel bit him. You stop suddenly. There it is, the stall that might just save you. It's unassuming, just a wooden board balanced on bricks, but on it sits a row of small golden hand pies. They look warm, flaky, and most importantly, unburnt. The woman behind it doesn't yell. She just nods when you approach. "Smells good," you say. "Tastes better," she replies. "How much?" She eyes. You then glances at your comb sticking out slightly from your coat pocket. "I'll trade," she says, voice low. You blink. "You want?" "A comb." She nods. "Lost mine yesterday. Wind took it." You hesitate. The comb was a luxury, a treasure, but so is food, and the growl in your stomach feels more pressing than tangled hair. You slide the comb across the makeshift counter. She hands you a pie wrapped in newsprint. "It's hot enough to burn your fingers." "Meat and onion," she whispers. "Probably beef." "Probably." You thank her and take a bite. The crust crumbles softly, buttery and still warm. The filling is peppery, savoury, and miracle of miracles without any bones or suspicious textures. You close your eyes and chew slowly, reverently. You're not sure if it's the best thing you've ever eaten or just the best thing you've eaten today. Either way, you almost cry. You find a spot near the edge of the square beside a crate of turnips that's too old to be guarded. You sit legs tucked in and finish the pie, one glorious bite at a time. The newsprint wrapper sticks to your fingers. You read the smeared text idly between mouthfuls. Scandal in the House of Lords Viscount. Caught in corset debacle. You smirk. The market noise fades a little. The rain has stopped. A breeze stirs the flags above the stalls. You pull your shawl closer and exhale a puff of steam. Your fingers are greasy. Your stomach is no longer trying to eat your spine. And for the first time today, you don't feel like London is actively trying to kill you. You watch people go by mothers, scolding toddlers, butchers weighing slabs of meat, a man in a top hat trying not to look like he's lost. No one notices you. Which is fine. You're full. You're still here. And for now, that's enough. You linger in the market square a little longer than you should, soaking up the warmth of that meat pie like a lizard in a sunbeam, if sunbeams ever bothered to show up in Victorian London. But time like fog doesn't stop. It just curls around you until you forget how late it's getting. The shadows begin to stretch long and spindly across the cobblestones. The fog thickens again, not heavy, but persistent, like someone whispering in your ear that you ought to be moving along. And so you do. You head south toward the older districts where buildings crowd together like gossiping relatives. You pass laundry strung like bunting between windows, grey sheets, yellowed underthings, a pair of trousers waving like a defeated flag. From one sill, a woman is shouting at her children in a voice that could sand paint. Your destination is uncertain. You're not due anywhere. You don't have appointments. You have instincts. And right now they're pointing you toward a friend's flat. Maybe, if they're home. If they still live there. You round a corner and nearly collide with a woman corseted within an inch of her dignity. "Watch it," she snaps, staggering slightly in her heeled boots. You mumble an apology and step back, taking in her outfit. Layers of satin delicate lace gloves, and a bonnet so large it might have its own postal code. She steadies herself and moves on her hips, swaying unnaturally. Corsets. The iron embrace of Victorian fashion. Tight-laced, spine-straightening, breath-stealing contraptions meant to sculpt a woman's body into the ideal silhouette, cinched waist, lifted bust, rigid posture. Never mind that you can't bend, twist, or breathe properly. Style demands sacrifice. There are debates, of course. Modern historians still argue whether corsets were instruments of oppression or expressions of beauty. Some say they empowered women through elegance. Others claim they were simply fabric prisons disguised as underwear. Either way, a sneeze in the wrong direction could ruin your afternoon. You see another woman across the street, clutching a lamppost for balance. She inhales in short gasps, fanning herself with one hand and gripping her corseted midsection with the other. A gentleman offers her a handkerchief. She declines, but takes the attention like medicine. Not everyone wore corsets, of course. Working-class women often couldn't afford them, and even when they could, practicality won out over posture. You, for one, have never understood the appeal of strapping yourself into something that makes stairs feel like a duel with gravity. You pass a shop window with a corset display, 6 different colours each, paired with delicate lace and sinister boning. The price tag makes your teeth ache. You smirk. Imagine paying for discomfort. The rain has stopped, but now the wind picks up, threading its icy fingers through your shawl. You wrap it tighter and glance toward the next street. Ah, there it is. Rag and Bone Alley. Officially called something else, but no one remembers what. The alley is a thin corridor of stacked crates leaning sheds and things. That once were. A dog barks somewhere in the distance, and a flock of pigeons, grey on grey, erupts from a rooftop like soot with wings. You pass an old woman with a cart full of mismatched shoes and broken teapots. She nods at you. You nod back. This is where the unclaimed things go. The things left behind. The not quite trash, not quite treasure. You sift through a stack of tattered books. One still has a cover. Another smells like mildew and ink. You slip it into your coat when no one's looking. Not to steal it, just to keep it from disappearing. You hear music, faint, plucky, and cheerful to the point of insincerity. A man nearby is playing a concertina while standing atop a crate. His fingers move like clockwork, and his hat lies open at his feet, collecting pennies and old buttons. A few children dance awkwardly in front of him, half from joy, half from cold. You stop to listen. The tune is simple, looping endlessly, a song about apples or love, or maybe both. The lyrics don't matter. The rhythm does. It keeps your feet moving even when you want to stop. Nearby, a pair of women argue over a shawl. One claims it was hers last week. The other says it was hers last year. Neither one looks like they've eaten today. The shouting turns into swearing, then coughing, then silence. The concertina plays on. You slip away from the alley as the shadows thicken. Ahead is your friend's building, or at least the building that used to be hers. 3 stories of leaning brick, a staircase that wheezes when you step on it, and windows that haven't seen a cleaning rag since Queen Victoria's wedding. You knock. No answer. You knock again, more softly this time. Eventually a man opens the door. Shirtless, barefoot, with a newspaper tucked into his waistband. He squints at you, then shakes his head. Moved out last week, he mutters. Went south. Or east. Don't remember. You nod, thank him, and walk away. Your legs are tired now. Not sore, just heavy. The kind of heavy that creeps into the bones and sets up camp. You find a low wall near the edge of the alley and sit. The concertina has stopped. The fog thickens once more. The city breathes. You pull the stolen book from your coat. The cover reads, The Florist's Daughter. Inside, the pages are spotted and soft. But the words are still there. You read the first line aloud just to hear something beautiful in the fog. And for a little while you forget about corsets, pies, soot and rain. You just sit and read and breathe. The words on the page blur slightly as the dimming light presses in part fog, part dusk, part the quiet fatigue crawling behind your eyes. You close the book gently and tuck it back into your coat where it sits like a secret. There's something deeply soothing about stolen literature in a borrowed moment of peace. But peace never lingers long in Victorian London. A sudden clatter draws your attention, a cartwheel hitting a loose cobblestone, followed by the unmistakable splash of something wet. You look up to see a group of boys laughing as they dodge through the street. One trips and nearly lands in a heap of slush. No one offers a hand. He gets up and keeps running, because slowing down in this city only invites questions and cold. You rise from the wall, stretch your legs, and head northeast. You're not chasing anything. You're just not ready to be still again. You pass another row of homes pressed shoulder to shoulder, each one more slumped than the last. Laundry lines sag overhead, dripping faintly. Behind one cracked door you hear the thin drone of a schoolmaster's voice, reciting something about maps and mountains. You pause, glance through the smudged glass window, and catch a glimpse of the ragged school. These institutions, ragged in name and nature, are meant to educate the poorest children in London. Charity-funded, overcrowded, and underheated, they still serve as the only sliver of structured learning available to many. You step closer and peer in. The children sit on long benches, most without shoes. Their clothes are patched with love and desperation. The air inside must be warmer than the street because you see steam rising from heads like miniature clouds of thought. A boy in the front row turns and notices you. You wave slightly. He doesn't wave back, but he doesn't look away either. Victorian education reform was gaining momentum during this time. The Elementary Education Act of 1870 had passed not long ago, establishing the framework for compulsory schooling. But the act is riddled with exceptions, and many children still slip through the cracks, especially those who are expected to work sweep chimneys or fish valuables from the river mud. Scholars remain divided on whether the system was intended to uplift or simply occupy the working poor. Either way, books were rarely new lessons, often memorized by rote and discipline meted out with a ruler and a scowl. You watch for a moment longer, listening to the rhythm of the lesson. Mount Etna is a volcano, the teacher drones. It erupts from pressure beneath the earth. The door creaks open slightly, and a young girl slips out. Her boots are mismatched and soaked through, but she walks with quiet purpose. She glances at you, then back down. She doesn't speak, but her hand clutches a torn notebook like a lifeline. She turns down an alley and vanishes into the mist. You walk on, thoughts swirling like chimney smoke. Learning in London feels like rebellion, a battle between survival and curiosity, between how to count pence and how to spell catastrophe. You remember your own schooling, or scraps of it. One kindly teacher, one frightening one, and one who smelled perpetually of pickled onions and despair. You didn't finish, of course. No one in your lane did. Not when work offered food and school offered words. Still, you've carried the words with you. They're lighter than bread, quieter than coins, and often just as valuable. You reach the end of the street where the buildings open up again, revealing a wider road lined with gas lamps. Some flicker, some don't bother. The fog glows orange around them, giving the whole road a theatrical feel, like a stage waiting for actors who forgot their lines. To your left you hear shouting. Not angry shouting, but desperate, high-pitched calls punctuated by laughter and the occasional splash. You follow the sound and find yourself at the edge of the Thames. Well, what's pretending to be the Thames? The water is thick, dark and sluggish. It looks less like a river and more like a stew that's lost the will to simmer. Along its banks, children sift through the mud with sticks and bare hands. They're searching for anything with resale value: buttons, bones, bits of copper, sometimes teeth. You've found the mudlarks. These scavengers, mostly boys, but not always, spend their days combing the river's filth in search of treasure, or at least something not entirely worthless. Their finds might earn a few pence at the rag shop. Enough for bread, sometimes enough for a night under a dry roof, usually not enough for both. One boy holds up a cracked porcelain doll head and shouts triumphantly. The others laugh and take turns placing it on a stick like some grim puppet. You watch with something between pity and admiration. They're working, playing, surviving all at once. A girl no older than 8 digs with a small metal spoon. She unearths something shiny and holds it to the light. It's a coin, or maybe just a washer, doesn't matter. She tucks it away like treasure and keeps digging. You approach the waterline, careful not to slip. The mud sucks at your boots. The air smells worse than before brine sulphur, and the faint sweetness of rot. You bend down and pick up a shard of glass worn smooth by years in the river. It's beautiful in a way. Useless but beautiful. You pocket it. The fog thickens again, rolling off the water like it's trying to reclaim what the mudlarks took. You step back onto firmer ground and glance once more at the children. They don't notice you. They're too focused. Too busy. Too alive. You move on up a narrow path that winds away from the river. Your fingers are cold. Your boots are heavier now, caked with something you don't want to examine. But there's still enough light in the sky to see where you're going, and that's something. You reach a higher road, one that clings to the riverbank but dares to rise above it at least for a while. From here you can see the rooftops and chimneys of East London layered beneath the fog like pages in a forgotten book. The sun's trying to quit for the day, dipping low behind the city's grime-streaked skyline, but its light still clings to the smoke in golden smudges. It should be quiet here, but it's not, because this is smog territory, not just fog, not just chimney smoke, but the dreaded London particular. A thick yellow-brown blanket of soot and sulphur, so heavy you can taste it. You cough once, then again. You pull your shawl over your mouth like a soldier donning a gas mask, though of course no one's invented those yet. Victorian London's smog was legendary. Some of it was natural fog. Most of it was man-made. Coal fires, factory chimneys, gas lamps, and the million stoves burning to keep damp walls at bay. When all that smoke met the city's ever-present humidity, it created something close to atmospheric glue. People stumbled through streets they walked every day, and found themselves lost 2 doors from home. There were days the sun never showed its face. And during the worst of it, people simply vanished into the yellow. You squint into the distance. The gas lamps are lit now, casting halos that barely pierce the gloom. They're more aesthetic suggestion than functional light. One flickers like it's unsure whether continuing is worth the effort. You pass a man selling scarves, though most are just strips of cloth dipped in vinegar. Helps with the fumes, he calls out, shaking a length of damp wool at a passing couple. The woman holds a lace handkerchief over her nose. The man does nothing, and walks with the confidence of someone used to inhaling bricks. You keep moving, though slower now. The smog pulls at your steps, wrapping around your ankles, making the very air feel thick and reluctant. To your left, a woman stumbles. Her bonnet slips off. She doesn't pick it up. She clutches her chest and leans against a lamppost, breathing in shallow sips. You hurry over. "You all right, miss?" you ask, voice muffled by your scarf. She waves you off. "Just the fog," she croaks, catches the lungs. "Been worse lately," you say. "Been worse always," she replies, and then disappears into the murk like a vanishing act with no applause. You stare after her, not quite sure if she was real. Scholars remain divided on whether the worst of London's smogs were true weather events, coal-related disasters, or the earliest signs of industrial self-destruction. Some argue they were accidental byproducts of progress. Others suggest they were simply accepted costs, collateral damage in the race to power the empire. The truth, as usual, is somewhere between the lungs and the ledger books. You cough again, a dry, hollow sound that echoes faintly off the bricks. Up ahead, you see an apothecary's sign swinging in the haze. Bennett's Remedies and Tonics. The paint is peeling, but the lamp inside glows warm and steady. You step inside and are immediately hit with the scent of dried herbs, camphor, and something floral, trying to cover something chemical. The shelves are lined with bottles, glass-corked and menacing. Labels read laudanum tincture, of opium blood purifier, and violet elixir. One has a label that says simply, for moods. You don't ask. Behind the counter stands a man in a vest too tight and a smile too wide. Evening, miss, he says, eyes flicking to your boots. Walking through this muck, without a tonic brave. Just browsing, you reply. He nods. Course you are. Everyone's browsing till the lungs give out. You examine a bottle of coal lung soother. The label promises relief from smog soot and the weariness of modern life. The ingredients, opium, turpentine and peppermint. You put it back. Victorian medicine is, in a word, experimental. Tonics are sold like candy. Arsenic and mercury appear on ingredient lists with alarming regularity. Herbal means anything that once grew. Side effects are listed, if at all, as occasional tremors or mild insanity. Experts today look back with horror, but for the people living it, these bottles are hope. Sweet-tasting, numbing, occasionally fatal hope. You thank the apothecary and step outside. The fog seems thicker now, if that's possible. Even your eyelashes feel damp. Your lungs feel tight, as though the air has grown teeth. You pass a gas lamp and rest a hand on the post for balance. The metal is warm from the flame which sputters and flickers behind its glass enclosure like a tired heartbeat. There's an odd stillness now. Fewer footsteps. No voices. Just the distant clop of hooves and the creak of buildings shifting in the night air. Then a figure ahead, standing still, facing you. You stop. They don't move. You step slightly to the side. So do they. Then you realize your reflection caught in a puddle of rain and oil and lantern light. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because laughter feels like rebellion. You press on. Eventually you come to a small archway, leading to a side street. You duck through and emerge into what seems like a separate world. The fog here is thinner. A single window glows with candlelight. Somewhere a piano plays softly, an out-of-tune melody drifting from an upstairs parlour. You sit on a dry step and rest your back against the brick. You're not far from where you started this morning, but it feels like you've walked 1,000 lives since then. Your hands are black with soot. Your throat is raw. Your coat is damp and heavy. But you're still here. And the city hasn't eaten you yet. You sit for a while on that stone step, letting the quiet wrap around you like a second shawl. It's one of the few quiet places left in the city, tucked behind a boarding house, and half forgotten by even the rats. The distant piano falters, then stops, replaced by muffled voices and the creak of old floorboards. You close your eyes for a breath and pretend you live in that warm, glowing upstairs room, just long enough to forget that your bones are soaked through. And then from the street beyond you hear it, a burst of shouting, a whistle blown sharply, and the unmistakable thud of fast footsteps on wet cobblestone. You stand quickly and round the corner. A crowd is gathering near the front of a print shop, drawn to a wall of fresh paper posters pasted unevenly in the gaslight. You edge closer, squinting at the cheap ink headlines, and there it is, in bold, blocky letters, Murder in Mile and Gutter Press, strikes again. Beneath it, a lurid drawing of a shadowy figure in a top hat looms over a woman fainting beside a lamppost. The accompanying article promises a tale of horror, betrayal, and dark alley revenge. For a penny you can take the full issue home. For free you can read the part that's drying on the wall. You hear gasps from the crowd. A man leans in and mutters, "Was it the Ripper again?" Another shakes his head. "No, that was Whitechapel. This one's a new fella. Calls himself the Phantom of Fleet Street." A woman snorts behind you. "Last week it was the Stitcher. Next week it'll be the Smog Demon. They make these up to sell more rags." She's not wrong. You've seen 100 headlines like this one. Penny dreadfuls, they're called. Cheap serialized fiction full of villains, vices, and very questionable accuracy. Ostensibly they report the news. In reality they invent it, twist it, and serve it up with blood and gaslight for flavour. You step closer and read the first line aloud. "It was a foggy night, and murder crept in on silent boots. Of course it was foggy. It's always foggy. Experts still debate the impact of penny dreadfuls on the public mind. Some say they kept the lower classes entertained and literate. Others argue they stoked fear and hysteria, creating panic where none was warranted. The truth likely is that they did both, depending on what you were looking for. You glance back at the illustration. The villain's features are vague, but you recognize the tropes: tall, broad-shouldered hat brim, low knife, glinting in hand. He's always a silhouette, he's always male, and he's always lurking. The woman in the drawing clutches her bosom and faints dramatically. You'd laugh if it didn't echo the way real women sometimes ended up faces in gutters, names in footnotes, stories lost under layers of soot and half-remembered rumour. You step away from the wall, your mood heavier now. Not because of the tale itself, but because of the way it's consumed, the way people lean in eyes wide, craving the thrill of someone else's terror. Around the corner you see a newsboy packing up his stack of unsold papers. Slow night, you ask. He shrugs. Everyone's waiting for a murder that ain't been solved. You nod. Aren't we all? He tilts his cap and disappears into the fog with his wagon creaking behind him. You keep walking. The city is quieter now, like it's holding its breath. Fewer people on the streets. Just the occasional boot-scrape carriage clatter or dog snarl from the shadows. The gas lamps hiss, softly flames flickering behind warped glass. The fog glows orange at their edges. You hear someone running again, quieter this time. A man in a wool coat rounds the corner, glances at you, then keeps going. His footsteps vanish into the distance like he's being chased by something he can't name. You walk on until you pass a second news board. This one's been torn halfway through. The headline barely legible now: Body found near St. George's. Police. No leads. You don't stop to read more. You've read it before. 100 times. Only the names change. And sometimes not even that. You reach the edge of a square. It's wide open, framed by black iron railings and wilting trees. A statue stands in the middle. Someone important, probably. A military man, sword-drawn, gaze noble. His face is streaked with grime, bird droppings dried on his shoulders. A single flower sits at the base of the pedestal. A daffodil, wilted but bright. Someone's idea of hope, maybe. You sit on the cold stone bench beneath the statue's gaze. Nearby, a man stands selling pamphlets about spiritualism and ghost sightings. He tells a couple walking past that the fog traps souls who never made peace with their sins. They nod politely and move on. You wonder idly whether anyone would haunt this place, or whether London haunts itself. The fog thickens again. The statue vanishes behind it like it's never been there. You lean back against the bench. Your breath comes in quiet clouds, and the city keeps watching, always. You stay seated on the bench longer than you meant to, the chill creeping in through your spine, settling behind your knees. The stone is unforgiving, but at least it's solid, unmoving, a luxury in a city where everything shifts beneath your feet. You're not sure what time it is anymore. The fog has stolen the sky, and the gas lamps aren't interested in helping you figure it out. A sharp whistle cuts through the stillness. You flinch, eyes scanning. It's not the constable's warning kind of whistle. No, this is different. Shrill, rhythmic, almost musical. You turn toward the sound, and through the haze, see a figure emerge from a side street pushing a heavy wooden cart with brass fixtures and a rust-streaked chimney puffing lazy smoke into the night. The mobile chemist, or more accurately the quack doctor. He parks beside the square and flips open one panel of his cart, revealing rows of mismatched glass bottles, powders in paper packets, and a few rusted metal tools that look suspiciously surgical. A small crowd gathers, shuffling, curious, half-frozen people drawn by the possibility of a miracle, or at least a distraction. He launches into his pitch with all the flourish of a music hall actor. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and be healed by the finest tinctures in Her Majesty's empire. Gout gone consumption, cured melancholy, melted, no more ghosts in the blood, you raise an eyebrow. He produces a bottle the colour of regret and holds it aloft. Arsenic opium, turpentine, and a touch of lavender, delicious and effective. A woman next to you murmurs, "I gave that to my husband." He stopped complaining. A pause, and also breathing. Someone laughs. Victorian medicine is like a gamble made blindfolded. There are real doctors, of course, but they're expensive, and many are still trying to decide whether leeches or mercury should be their go-to. So people like this fellow step in to fill the gap between illness and despair. Some sell actual cures. Most sell bottled poetry with dangerous side effects. You step closer to the cart. A sign reads, "Cures for common ailments and uncommon fates." Tempting. You spot a bottle labelled, "Night Tonic for Restless Ladies." The label promises to relieve nerves, nightmares, and improper opinions. You don't ask what's in it. You already know laudanum mostly. Opium's gentle cousin. It numbs everything. Pain, sadness, thought, maybe even dreams. Scholars remain divided on whether these street remedies prolonged lives, or simply delayed death in slightly more pleasant fashion. There are stories of miracle turnarounds and just as many of hallucinations, heart failure, or worse. Still the line forms. You watch as a boy trades a button and a copper halfpenny for something claiming to cure chronic sighing. A man purchases a small tin labelled "Wife Tamer." He winks at the seller. The seller does not wink back. You move along, not buying anything, just listening. A girl of about 16 approaches and whispers something to the chemist. He nods quietly, reaches into a locked drawer and hands her a small envelope. She tucks it into her coat and vanishes. Abortifacient, probably. You don't judge. You just wonder how many she's bought before. As the crowd thins, the chemist wipes his hands on a rag, closes the cart panels and disappears as quickly as he came. The smoke from his chimney trails after him, leaving a sour herbal scent that tries and fails to cover the city's bass note of soot and sweat. You walk on thoughts muddled. Your path winds you into a darker part of town, not in terms of morality necessarily, but in gaslight maintenance. The lamps here are mostly broken. One leans at a severe angle, like it's had a rough week. A rat scurries across your path, dragging something with a tail. You try not to look closely. This is the part of London where stories start and end without witnesses. Ahead you hear footsteps, light, nervous, uneven. You follow the sound and catch up with a woman hurrying down the lane. She clutches her shawl tightly, eyes flicking behind her with every few steps. You glance around. The street is empty, but the shadows are thick enough to hide anything, or anyone. She turns suddenly and sees you. She stops. You stop too. You raise a hand slowly. "Just walking." She nods. "Sorry. Didn't mean to." "It's all right," you say. "These streets have teeth." She exhales. "I hate going home this late. I don't think they care what time it is." She smiles faintly, then moves on. You do too, in a different direction. Because even a simple walk home can feel like a gamble in a city like this. You pass a small shopfront with the shutters half drawn. Inside you see shelves lined with books, trinkets and odd statues. The sign above reads "Dr. Bellamy's Remedies and Antiquarian Curiosities." You step inside. A bell chimes, and a man in round spectacles looks up from a ledger. The air smells of pipe smoke and something faintly metallic. "Looking for a cure?" he asks. "Just curiosity," you reply. He nods. "That's the better illness." You browse quietly. A display case holds amber bottles from a different era. Another shelf features books with titles like "The Humours of Man" and "Phrenological Atlas of the British Skull." One corner showcases odd charms: rabbit's feet, pressed herbs, bits of bone strung like rosaries. Superstition meets science here. Logic folds around folklore, and no one seems to mind the contradiction. You thank him and step back into the street. The fog is lighter now, the smog thinned by a rare breeze that smells faintly of baking bread from somewhere you can't see. You let the night settle around your shoulders again, like a second coat. Still breathing, still whole, still walking. And somewhere a whistle blows again. But this time it's not for you. You're deeper in the city now. Past the gas lamps, past the bookshops and the medicinal snake oil, past anything polite and decorative. This part of London smells like old meat and new lies. The streets here are narrower, sloped, and more forgiving to rats than to people. You step carefully, half from instinct, half from memory. Your stomach grumbles again, not from hunger this time, but confusion. It knows something's coming, and it's bracing. Then you see it, a pie stall, just standing there under a torn canopy, its lantern swinging faintly from a rusty hook. The man behind the cart has the unmistakable look of someone who's made peace with morally questionable meat. "Even in love," he croaks. "Fancy a pie." You glance down. They're warm. They're round. They're leaking slightly. "What kind?" you ask. He winks. Don't ask. That's not comforting. Victorian street food is many things: cheap, convenient, occasionally tasty. But hygienic? Never. Pie vendors pop up at odd hours, slinging crusty, steaming pockets of mystery that might contain mutton, might contain cat, might be mostly pastry seasoned with ambition and soot. The meat is never fresh, but it is hot, and that counts for a lot. Experts still debate what went into these meat pies, especially in poorer districts. Horse meat, offal rat, anything that could be chopped fine and buried under crust was fair game. Some argue the danger was exaggerated. Others point to health reports that include words like outbreak intestinal devastation and was formerly breathing. You decline politely and keep walking. The vendor shrugs. More for me. You pass another cart with jars of pickled eggs trembling gently in vinegar. They look like props from a haunted play. Next to them, a tray of jellied eels glistening under a weak lantern. You pause, fascinated and horrified. A boy sidles up next to you. They bite going down, he whispers. Then he's gone. You move on. Your next stop isn't a choice. It's a necessity. Because the smell leads you straight to the source, the fishmonger. Now, to be fair, not all fishmongers smell like old regret. Some are honest tradesmen with fresh catches, clean counters, and a love of salted cod. This one is not. His stall looks like it was once a shipwreck. The fish stare blankly from wooden crates, glassy-eyed and accusatory. One has a boot print on it. The monger looks up as you approach and gestures with a thumb. Half off, if you can name it. You glance at the fillets. They might be haddock. Might be haddock's angrier cousin. Is that eel, you try? He grins. Close. It's probably eel. You nod. That's enough culinary adventure for one evening. As you turn to leave, a soft thwack draws your attention. A man at a small table is chopping something with rhythmic determination. You drift closer. It's a sort of stew stand. A pot bubbles gently, steam mixing with the fog. Penny stew, he says without looking up. You hesitate. What's in it? He finally looks up. Bits. You arch an eyebrow. Bits of what he considers. Mostly potato. Some bone. A hint of onion. Maybe lamb. The steam does smell like lamb. Or hope. You hand him a penny and receive a tin cup half full of what looks like cloudy tea with ambition. You sit on a step and sip. It's hot. That's the best thing you can say about it. But halfway through you fish out a cube of something real. Potato, thank heavens. You chew slowly then, return to sipping. You finish the cup, return it with a quiet thank you, and step back into the street. There's a warmth in your stomach now, a flicker of comfort. It won't last long, but it doesn't have to. You lean against a lamppost to catch your breath. The fog dances at your feet like it's listening to distant music. A constable walks past without looking at you. That's a good sign. Suddenly, from a nearby alley, a voice cuts through the mist. Soup? Free soup. You blink. Did you imagine that? You follow the sound and find a tiny mission house, barely wider than a bakery cart. A hand-painted sign reads Evening Comfort. Non-denominational charity soup for all. You step inside. A woman in a grey apron hands you a cup of broth with a nod. It's thin, watery, but the herbs in it smell real. Thyme, maybe. Parsley or something close. You sit beside a man who's already halfway through his cup. He looks up and says, if you pretend it's chicken, it almost is. You sip. It's not chicken, but it's warm. And tonight, warmth matters more than accuracy. There's a quiet in this room. Not silence, people still murmur, cups still clink, but it's the quiet of shared tiredness. A sanctuary of steam and soft voices. You notice a basket near the hearth, threadbare gloves, scarves with holes, one child's boot. Donations, you realize. You reach into your coat and pull out the glass shard from the Thames you picked up earlier. You slip it into the basket. Not practical, but beautiful. And maybe someone else needs to see something beautiful tonight. You finish your broth, thank the woman, and step outside. The fog hugs you like a damp relative. You breathe in, and this time it doesn't choke. Just settles in your lungs like old paper. You walk slowly now, the kind of slow that comes after food, after noise, after survival. You hear someone singing in the distance, a lullaby maybe, or just a song for staying upright. You hum along, and the city hums back. You turn a corner, and suddenly the air shifts. It's not colder, though it's cold. Not darker though, the fog's rolled back in like a theatre curtain. No, this is something else. There's a gathering ahead, a crowd, not the usual bustle of market shoppers or beggars chasing coin, but a throng with a mood excited, uneasy, expectant. You edge forward cautiously until you see it. A rope, taut between two posts. Above it, a wooden platform. Upon it, a man standing very, very still. The crowd is here for a public hanging. You freeze not because you're shocked. These are common enough in your part of London. Cheap entertainment in a city where distractions are as rare as fresh air. But something about this one feels heavier. The man on the platform isn't weeping. He's not shouting his innocence or praying to God. He's just watching the crowd. Quiet. Still. You step closer. Not too close. You don't want the splash. The hangman stands beside him, bored and businesslike. The crowd's already begun placing bets, how long he'll twitch, how clean the drop will be, whether there'll be a speech. Someone nearby munches loudly on a hot turnip like it's a theatre snack. Poisoned his landlord, someone whispers. Said the rent was sinful. Good for him, someone else mutters. You try not to stare, but it's difficult. There's a gravity to it. Not the execution, but the ritual of it. The way people gather half with glee, half pretending they're too moral to enjoy it. Public executions were supposed to be deterrents, but by the mid-1800s they were more like festivals. Whole families came, parents with children on shoulders, sweetmeat vendors peddling their wares, pickpockets, making the most of the tight crowd. Historians still argue whether the practice reflected a society bent on justice or one addicted to spectacle. Either way, the mood was never solemn. It was rarely even somber. The man on the scaffold clears his throat. Silence ripples outward. I did what I did, he says, voice calm, and I do it again. That's it. No tears, no final wish, no confession in rhyme. The hangman nods once, and then the trapdoor opens. You look away, not out of horror, but out of respect. The crowd doesn't. They watch with that feral fascination people reserve for anything between tragedy and sport. A few moments later, the body is still. The excitement starts to disperse. Children tug their mothers' sleeves. Someone claps. Someone else throws up. You move on, not because you're unaffected, but because there's no other choice. You pass a group of boys mimicking the drop with a length of twine and a stick. They laugh. One ties the noose too well. You keep walking. Victorian London teaches you to step lightly around death, not because it's rare, but because it's everywhere. Wrapped in scarves, folded into newspapers, hidden behind coughs and chalk outlines. Just 3 blocks down, you find a quieter crowd. This one is smaller. Older, huddled around a wooden cart where a woman is reciting lines from King Lear, barely louder than a whisper. Her stage is the edge of a crumbling step. Her props a paper crown, a scarf for a cape. She curtsies when she finishes. No applause. But someone gives her a coin. You give her your last crust of bread. Bless you, she says. I've tasted worse communion. You nod, smile, and move on. The streets feel strange now, half shadow, half echo. Like something's waiting to be written here, and you're the only one who might write it. A constable passes you, truncheon swinging lightly against his hip. He doesn't look twice at you, but his whistle is looped through his coat like a threat. You hear another voice nearby, murder in Bermondsey. Read all about it. Another penny dreadful. Another scandal pinned to ink and sold like candy. You don't stop this time. Instead, you find your feet carrying you toward the edge of the city proper, where tenements begin to thin, and the smell of water replaces the smell of rot. You pass a bridge. A man sits under it, talking to no one, pointing at something only he can see. You don't interrupt. You keep going until you find another crowd. Yes, another. But this one's different. It's a circle of people gathered around a violinist. A woman this time. Her coat is torn. Her fingers are blue. But the sound, it's clear. In a city of mud and smoke and shouting, it's clear. The music pierces the fog like it's made of light. The tune is a lullaby, you think, but older. Maybe Eastern European. Maybe older still. You've never heard it before, and somehow you know every note. The crowd listens unmoving. No one claps. No one speaks. They just breathe and blink and listen. You close your eyes, and for the briefest moment the fog lifts not just the air but your mind. The city steps back. The noise softens. You forget your boots are wet and your stomach is empty. You forget there was a hanging. You forget the pie stall. There's just the music. And when it stops, no one says anything. They just walk away. And so do you. The music lingers long after your feet have carried you away. It's lodged in your chest now, somewhere between your lungs and your ribs, like a warmth that refuses to cool. You walk softer, slower, not because the street demands it, but because the moment feels too delicate to shatter. But London, ever impatient, doesn't allow softness for long. A sharp, sour smell hits your nose. You're near the river again, but not the part where merchants, dockboats, or ladies walk by in gloved curiosity. No, this is the under-river, the flank, the place where the city forgets to dress itself. The edge of the east where scavengers dwell, and water laps with the consistency of spilled ink, and among the scavengers you spot them, mudlarks again. Not the same children as before, but the same rhythm, same posture. Faces bent down, feet in the sludge, fingers rummaging through layers of history, filth and hope. One girl is up to her knees in muck boots, long gone dress tied up at her waist. She drags a broken barrel stave like a sword. You watch as she prods something half-buried, mutters a curse and tosses it aside. A younger boy nearby holds up a cracked spoon, with such triumph you'd think he unearthed Excalibur. You approach slowly, careful not to make noise. You're not here to disrupt, you're here to observe, maybe to remember. One of the older boys glances up. "You larkin or spyin'?" he asks, squinting at you through soot-rimmed eyes. "Just passing," you reply. "Best not linger," he says, and gestures behind him with a jerk of his chin. "Water's got a mood today." You glance at the river and he's right. The tide has turned sluggish and thick, like something breathing from beneath. The water doesn't lap it, huffs exhaling foul air that coats your tongue with bitterness. The mudlarks don't care. They've seen worse. Some historians romanticize them, child adventurers braving the unknown, discovering relics of a forgotten London. Others call them what they are, survivors of systemic neglect, scraping through disease-ridden shores to earn a crust. Scholars still debate whether their work was truly independent labor or just another form of child exploitation wrapped in a ragged scarf. You watch one boy kneel and scoop something from the shallows. He turns it in his hands, a brass doorknob. His grin widens. "Solid," he mutters. "Polish it. Sell it. Easy." Another girl nearby digs up a clay pipe stem almost intact. She doesn't smile, just tucks it into her apron and keeps going. You step back away from the edge. Your boots make a wet squelch as you pull free of the mud. Across the street, under a drooping awning, an old man watches the children too. He leans on a walking stick carved from what might have once been a crutch. His coat is thick with patches. He sees you noticing and gives a slow nod. "River never forgets," he says. You nod back. "Nor does it forgive," he adds, almost thoughtfully. You don't reply. Some statements are too heavy to carry and too delicate to toss away. You keep walking, the echo of that phrase following you. River never forgets. You wander deeper into the waterfront quarter, where warehouses rise like sleeping beasts and broken crates clutter the alleys. A man whistles tunelessly as he wheels a barrow full of rusted hinges. A woman tugs a basket of mouldy onions from one doorstep to another. No one's really shopping, they're just exchanging failure. Up ahead you hear a rhythmic banging metal on metal. You follow the sound and come upon a small forge tucked between two shipping offices. The smith is a woman, sleeves rolled to her elbows, apron scorched hair, bound back in a red kerchief. She hammers a bent horseshoe with the practiced fury of someone who's lost patience with gentleness. You stand there for a moment, hypnotized by the sparks. She notices and jerks her head. "You need work? Or are you just collecting stories?" Both you say before thinking. She nods. "Aren't we all?" She sets the horseshoe in water, with a hiss, wipes her brow, and pulls out another scrap of iron. Her hands are black, her forearms muscular. There's a cut on one knuckle, red and raw, and she doesn't seem to notice it. Looking for a porter, she asks, almost amused. You shake your head. "Didn't think so," she adds, and the hammer starts again. You leave her there. In her rhythm, bang, hiss, bang, like a heartbeat the city forgot it had. Further down you pass a tavern. Not a cheery one with music and firelight, but the kind where the windows are frosted from the inside. Someone's shouting. A bottle breaks. You don't stop. There's no warmth for you in places like that, not unless you bring your own fire. You loop around the dockside and come across a boy no older than 12, standing beside a makeshift table. On it, a stack of newspapers, neatly folded ink, still smudging at the corners. He sees you. "Want one?" You glance at the top page. Queen attends opera, while London suffocates. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Wrote that one myself. Nobody reads the real ones. You flip it over. The back page has a drawing charcoal rough, but surprisingly skilled. It's a child standing in mud holding a spoon like a sword. The caption reads, Knight of the Riverbank. You smile. How much he looks at you. Just remember it, he says. No one else will. You nod, take the paper, and tuck it into your coat. You keep walking, boots thick with sludge, head thick with stories. Some told, some still forming, and somewhere behind you the river breathes again. Heavy, slow, watching. You move inland again away from the river and its sighs. The mud pulls at your boots like it wants to keep you, but you press forward toward the narrow veins of the city where the air, at least in theory, is drier. The fog still clings to your shoulders like a shroud, but it's thinner now, more suggestion than blanket. You're heading toward the edges of civility, where the street lamps stand straighter, where the cobblestones have been recently swept, and where the buildings are painted instead of flaking apart. This is where the middle class lives. If you can stretch the word middle wide enough to include tailors who only skip 2 meals a day, and here in this corner of town romance wears gloves. You pass the parlour windows first. Long lace curtains pulled halfway closed, flickering gaslights within. You catch glimpses, a hand smoothing a collar, a shadow, adjusting hair, a teacup poised on porcelain. The drawing rooms of Victorian courtship where love is a performance, and sometimes a transaction with actors trained in posture etiquette and the exact acceptable length of eye contact. You pause outside a confectionery shop just long enough to see a young man inside pressing a heart-shaped box of chocolates to his chest with the solemnity of a funeral pledge. The shop girl raises one eyebrow. He buys it anyway. Victorian dating is a labyrinth wrapped in etiquette and tied with a string of scandal. No hand-holding, no wandering glances, and certainly no unchaperoned tea. A man might take a woman's gloved hand once during a dance, and then write 4 letters afterward apologizing for the electricity. Scholars remain divided on whether this system protected women or just prolonged the inevitable. Either way, you're exhausted just thinking about it. You step into a small park square, mostly empty now, save for a few iron benches and the occasional gas lamp leaning just enough to seem thoughtful. A couple sits at opposite ends of one bench, staring forward with the intensity of people pretending they're not completely in love. She wears a bonnet dusted with frost. He holds his hat in his lap, like a fragile promise. They don't speak, but their silence is loud. You find an empty bench of your own and sit not watching them, but also not watching. Across the park, a woman walks briskly with a letter clutched in her gloved hand. She moves like the envelope is hot. Behind her, a man stops at a lamppost and checks his pocket watch as though it might lie to him about how long he's been waiting. You could live a dozen lives here and never learn a single name, but you'd know how they feel. Everything is telegraphed. Each cough, each lace ribbon, each pause between steps. Courtship in this city is a conversation written entirely in code. You remember once years ago watching a girl pick up a fallen glove and blush as she handed it back to a boy. They'd said nothing. The glove did the talking. And the rules. Good heavens, the rules. Too much eye contact. You're forward. Too little. You're cold. A smile. Scandalous. A letter. Only if it's sealed properly and smells faintly of lavender. And you'd better hope no one intercepts it. You rise and begin walking again, past shuttered florists and hat shops, with displays frozen mid-flirtation, one bonnet angled coyly next to a feathered cap, as if even mannequins are part of the matchmaking game. You turn a corner and find yourself near a narrow post office. A line has formed at the side window. One man holds a letter in both hands like he's afraid it might escape. A girl ahead of him hides hers in a book. You don't have a letter, but part of you wishes you did. Victorian letters were like miniature novels, pages of careful prose and breathless restraint. Even the envelopes had codes, wax colour angle, of seal placement of stamp. A red wax seal tilted left might mean love. A right-angled blue one could spell doom. The postal system, surprisingly efficient, for its time carried heartbreak and hope from house to house in crisp white uniforms. You watch a woman exit the post office and press a hand to her chest. Not to faint, but to feel something before it slipped away. You walk on. The lamps flicker more now, fighting against the growing dark. A man calls out matchsticks with the rhythm of someone who's said it 1,000 times and only been heard twice. You nod at him. He nods back. No trade, just recognition. Up ahead music. Not the mournful kind. Not the pub fiddle or the corner concertina. This is something finer. You follow the sound and end up outside a townhouse. Second floor window open just enough to let out the notes of a piano, played by someone who knows their way around longing. The song is soft. Not sad, not joyful, just soft. You stand across the street and listen. The light behind the window glows amber. A silhouette passes by, once a figure with hair pinned up and shoulders hunched ever so slightly. Then they're gone. Only the music remains. You lean against a lamppost and let the tune unravel around you. Your fingers twitch slightly, catching some rhythm they didn't know they remembered. You hum under your breath. When the piece ends, the window clicks shut. You smile and whisper a quiet thank you to no one in particular. The streets are emptying now. The couples are retreating indoors. The love letters are on their way to letterboxes. The pianists are blowing out their lamps. You turn your collar up against the wind and walk on. The city exhales, and so do you. You leave behind the flicker of parlour windows and piano music, stepping once again into the narrower lanes where the city loses its pretense. The cobblestones are uneven here, older, more worn. They've seen centuries of shoes, hooves and spills, and they hold every echo like a secret. You glance up and realise something peculiar. No one's around. No street hawkers. No vendors. Not even a matchstick girl. Just you. And the silence. Until suddenly from behind an iron gate comes the distinct clang of a bell. Low, steady, and oddly hollow. You know that sound. Everyone in London does. You've found yourself near one of the city's lunatic asylums. The sign on the wall confirms it's St. Agnes' House for the indigent and distressed mind. The building looms like a forgotten cathedral, tall stone walls, narrow windows barred like confession booths, and a front door heavy with implication. You cross the street without meaning to, and lean against the opposite wall staring. The place feels like it's holding its breath. A carriage stands at the gate. A man in a dark coat helps a woman step down. Her movements are slow, controlled, like she's been taught how to appear sane at all costs. Her eyes flick upward, once catching yours, and for a moment you recognize something in them. Not madness, but exhaustion. She vanishes inside. Victorian asylums were complicated places. Depending on where you went, you might receive care, cruelty, or both. Some institutions offered genuine treatment, peace, quiet, fresh air structure. Others were warehouses for the inconvenient. Husbands committed wives for hysteria. Families sent their elderly relatives for melancholia, and women who read too much, questioned too loudly, or wept too often were often labelled unfit for society. Experts still debate whether these institutions represented progress or punishment. The term moral treatment was used frequently, but morality in practice was often just obedience in disguise. You've heard stories, everyone has, of men who went in with grief and came out without memory, of women who learned to smile on command, of children who grew up within those walls and never once saw the sky unfiltered by bars. A nurse steps out of the side gate and dumps a pail of water into the street. It sloshes over the curb and runs past your boot, steaming faintly. She doesn't see you, or pretends not to. The bell rings again. You walk on. Your feet lead you toward a quieter side street, narrower even than the last. It twists once then again until you reach a low brick wall with ivy curling over the top like it's trying to hide something. You peer through a gap. Behind it is a small courtyard, just a square of grey flagstone, a few wooden benches, and one iron gate leading back inside. A woman sits on one bench, wrapped in a shawl too thin for the weather. Her hair is loose. Her hands are busy knotting and unknotting a piece of string. She's not locked in, but she's not leaving. You watch in silence until she ties a final knot, tucks the string into her sleeve and stands. She walks to the gate. It opens from the inside. She doesn't try it. She just stands there, waiting. For something. For nothing. You slip away before she sees you. London has a way of hiding its ghosts in plain sight. Not the kind with chains and moans. The living kind. The ones we lock behind gates and forget to write letters to. You pass another alley, this one lined with shuttered windows. A dog barks from somewhere behind a door. You hear laughter next. A soft, melodic giggle. Then silence. You don't stop, but the sound stays with you. The city's asylums are full, always. Not because everyone's unwell, but because everyone's expected to be well in the same way. Orderly, quiet, predictable. And anyone who breaks the rhythm is sent away to be fixed or forgotten. You reach the main road again just as a group of children skips by. Their hands are linked. One sings a rhyme about a baker and a chimney. It doesn't make sense. You don't care. You smile. You follow them for a block or two, just for the noise, just for the comfort. Then they turn a corner, and the fog swallows them whole. You pause beside a newspaper stand. A headline catches your eye. Calls for reform mental institutions under scrutiny. You raise an eyebrow. Beneath it, a smaller line. MP. Questions use of cold baths and restraints on women. You nod once, fold your arms tighter, and keep walking. Progress takes time, and in the meantime the gates remain closed. Back in your own lane, the air feels clearer. Not fresh. This is still London, but less heavy. You round another corner, and there it is, a small chapel tucked between two row houses. Its windows glow with amber light. The door is open. Inside you hear humming. Not singing, just humming. A single voice. You stand outside and listen. And for once you feel no need to go in. You just let the sound wash over you like a balm. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from inside a building. Sometimes it just comes from knowing where the doors are. You leave the chapel behind, its hum still vibrating faintly in your bones. There's something about music from a cracked doorway, how it makes you feel like the world's just a little kinder than you expected, even if only for a few bars. You keep walking, hands tucked under your armpits now. Not for propriety, but for warmth. Your fingers feel like old coins, dull, stiff, and forgotten in the cold. As you pass under another flickering gas lamp, you notice a cluster of black-clad figures gathered around a carriage. Not a cab, a hearse. Its wooden frame is polished to a shine, with glass windows on either side, and lace curtains drawn tastefully back to reveal the pine box within. No flowers, no mourning ribbons. Just four wheels, one box and a driver, who doesn't bother looking bored. He's seen more grief than any priest. You slow your steps. A woman steps out of the house nearby, wrapped in a shawl so dark it seems to drink in the gaslight. Her eyes are dry, not from lack of feeling, but from having nothing left to spill. She walks with her, chin raised, lips pressed tight. Behind her comes a girl 10, maybe carrying a small bouquet of white fabric roses. They're stiff with starch and too bright for the night. The coffin is lifted. A footman clears his throat, and with the efficiency of someone who's done this 3 times this week, the hearse begins its roll down the cobblestone road. You don't follow, but you do watch until it vanishes. Because Victorian funerals aren't just events, they're performances. Elaborate, expensive, ritualized goodbyes where mourning is measured in black dye and veil length. Entire industries exist just to support grief mourning, attire mourning, jewelry, mourning photography. Yes, mourning photography. The practice of posing with your dead loved ones as though they're sleeping. Eyes painted onto closed lids, props and braces to keep heads upright. A final portrait for the parlour. Historians still debate whether these images were acts of love or a macabre desire to control death. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Some families cherished them. Others shoved them in drawers and locked them away. You continue walking, passing shop windows, where mannequins are dressed head to toe in black bombazine. One has a crepe veil pulled forward like a net meant to catch tears. Another features a brooch with a lock of hair, real hair, woven into an intricate knot. It glints in the candlelight like a whisper no one meant to hear. The streets are quieter now, not empty but subdued, as though the city is pausing to nod respectfully at someone else's pain. You pass a small pub. Inside you see a man raise a glass, not in celebration, not even in conversation, just up, toward nothing, toward memory. You find yourself on another narrow lane, and here the houses lean in close together. From one window you hear the low drone of prayer. From another the sniffle of someone pretending not to cry. You remember a phrase someone once said to you, "London buries its dead with lace and whispers." Seems true enough. You reach a corner and find yourself in front of a mourning goods shop. The window is crowded with hats, veils, gloves, and tiny coffins made for dolls or children. The latter are for display. Probably. You enter. Not because you're mourning, not officially, but because grief doesn't always need an invitation. The inside smells of lavender and dust. A woman behind the counter looks up and nods. She doesn't ask if you've lost someone. In a shop like this, everyone has. You wander past a table of cards, pre-written condolence notes in perfect script. One reads, "We feel your sorrow keenly and share your burden in spirit." Another says simply, "Heaven receives its own." You run your fingers over a line of mourning rings. Some are thick and ornate, inlaid with jet and pearl. Others are plain bands engraved inside with initials and dates. You find one that fits. It has no name inside. You slide it on anyway. You leave a few coins on the counter, enough to seem polite, not enough to seem indulgent, and step back into the night. The fog's thinner now, but the chill has teeth. You tuck your hands into your sleeves again. You pass a child chalking something on a stoop. Not a game this time, just a shape, a heart, or maybe a window. Hard to tell. She looks up and says, "My da died." You pause. "I'm sorry." She nods. "He had good boots." You don't know what to say to that, so you just kneel down beside her and add one more line of chalk to her picture. A small one, an arch, maybe a sky. Then you stand. She doesn't ask your name, you don't ask hers. You just keep walking. Past the lace curtains, the black ribbons, the slow hearses, and closed eyes. Because in this city, death doesn't stop the living. It walks with them, quietly, patiently, always a few steps behind. You've walked far enough that your feet have gone numb, which is either a blessing or a warning depending on how charitable you're feeling tonight. The streets here slope upward, a gentle rise into one of London's trickier neighbourhoods, respectable by day, restless by night. And right now, it's very much night. As you crest the hill, the clatter of hooves interrupts the hush. You step aside just in time to avoid being trampled by an omnibus, one of those double-decker horse-drawn carriages that tries very hard to be both convenient and terrifying. It rumbles past wheels, squeaking horses, snorting passengers, swaying like laundry on a windy clothesline. You consider catching one for a moment, just for the experience, just for the warmth. Then you remember no money, no ticket. And besides, Victorian omnibuses are a gamble. If you make it to your destination with all your bones intact and your dignity unscathed, you've beaten the odds. You walk on. Omnibuses are, in theory, a miracle of transport. Cheap, relatively fast and open to almost everyone. But they're also overcrowded, top-heavy, and pulled by horses who've definitely seen things. Accidents were common: overturned carts, passengers thrown like dice, or the occasional spontaneous bolt down a side alley, driver screaming and reins flailing. Experts still debate whether these early public transport systems democratized the city or just extended the reach of chaos. Probably both. You pass a stop where a group of people waits in awkward silence. A woman checks her pocket watch every 30 seconds. A man picks invisible lint from his lapel like it insulted him. A child leans into his mother's coat, half asleep, dreaming of anything but this. No one speaks. The omnibus comes, eventually pulled by two exhausted horses who look like they've unionized in spirit, if not in paperwork. You keep walking, because the real magic of London isn't in getting somewhere, it's in wandering. You turn a corner and almost run straight into a chimney sweep again. Not a child this time, but a grown man, his face painted entirely in soot like a shadow made flesh. He grins at you with teeth too white for his profession. "Lovely night for breathing coal," he says cheerfully. You nod, half laugh, half wheeze. He tips his cap and disappears into a side alley with the speed of someone being paid by the minute. You continue on. The building's taller here, the lamps better tended. You pass a hotel with brass doorknobs and a doorman who could kill a man with a glance. You glance too long. He frowns. You move on. Just ahead you hear it again, the unmistakable ring of a bell, but this time higher, sharper, and followed by a frantic clatter of hooves. You press yourself against a wall as a hackney cab barrels past at breakneck speed, the driver barely holding the reins, passengers gripping the door frame like it's about to take flight. "Watch yourself," someone shouts. You don't respond. Your heart's too busy trying to climb into your throat. Victorian cabs are another marvel of the age, elegant in brochures, death traps in practice. The drivers are half magicians, half madmen navigating through fog and manure, with one eye closed and one hand on a whip. You once heard of a man who survived 3 wars, only to lose a leg falling off the back of a cab while trying to tie his shoe. You step cautiously back into the lane boots, squelching slightly in something you hope is just water. To your right, a narrow alley glows with candlelight. You peek in and see a row of modest homes, Single windows, lace curtains, flower pots turned black with soot. One woman leans out to empty a kettle. She sees you, nods, and disappears again. The calm here is brief but real, a kind of pocket inside the larger storm. You stop and lean against a lamppost, catching your breath. It hums faintly beneath your palm, gaslight hissing behind curved glass. Above you, the stars are trying, failing mostly, but still trying. You take a seat on a low stone ledge and let the silence wrap around you. It's not complete. London never truly sleeps, but it's quiet enough to think, to listen, to remember. You pull the paper from earlier, the one with the drawing of the mudlark. You unfold it slowly, smoothing out the creases. The ink has smudged at the corners, but the image is still clear. Still proud, still defiant. You stare at it for a long time. Then you fold it carefully and tuck it into your coat again, right over your heart. Up the road, another omnibus lurches past. This one empty. The horses clop slower now. The driver hums softly, unaware of your gaze. The whole thing rattles like a tired lullaby. You wonder how many people have lived entire lives without leaving their square mile of London. How many never rode those buses, never crossed the bridges, never dared a different view. You rise again, legs protesting. The fog returns, gentler now, less a veil, more a suggestion, and you walk back into it, because the journey is never really over. It just folds in on itself, like a map drawn from memory, and every step you take writes one more line across its surface. The road curves again, as if London itself is second-guessing the direction. You follow it without resistance, because what else can you do? In this city, the shortest path between 2 points is always emotional, never geographical. You pass a grocer's stall packing up for the night. The produce is more hopeful than edible turnips, bruised like old apples, carrots soft enough to fold in half, and a single cabbage that's seen better centuries. The vendor sweeps the cobbles without enthusiasm, pushing a mixture of leaves, sawdust, and something you don't want to identify into the gutter. He glances up. Want a pear? You look. It is not a pear. You shake your head politely. He shrugs and continues, sweeping his broom, knocking softly against the stone like a metronome set to exhaustion. Up ahead, you spot another familiar sight, the night watchman's box. It's just a small wooden hut, tucked between a butcher's and a chapel wall, but it radiates a kind of tired authority. Smoke curls from a flue in the back. A lantern glows inside, illuminating the hunched figure of the man himself, boots-off coat, draped over his lap hat pulled down low. He sees you. Cold one, he mutters. Colder than it looks, you reply. He nods. Anything worth stealing tonight, he asks, purely out of habit. Not even a thought, you answer. He grins. You're learning. The Victorian night watchman is part guardian, part gossip, part furniture. He's paid to stay awake when the rest of the world pretends to sleep, watching for fire theft or anything else that might disturb the illusion of peace. Some take it seriously. Most do not. But they all know more about the neighbourhood than the landlords, and more about its secrets than the clergy. You thank him for the warmth of his lamp, even if it's just with a nod, and move on. Your boots crunch over gravel now. Somewhere beneath the road, a coal chute yawns open, forgotten. You skirt around it just in time to avoid falling into a darkness that smells like wet rope and resentment. You turn onto a lane lined with boarding houses, narrow fronts, cracked windows, names etched into stone in serif fonts no one's bothered to read in years. The Peveril Arms, Miss Huntley's Temperance Lodgings. Number 6.5 Bellwether Lane. The one half scrawled by hand. Here's where the other London lives. The temporary residents, the unmarried clerks, the overworked, governesses, the people who send laundry out because there's nowhere inside to hang it. You pass one building where all the windows glow with candlelight, but no voices emerge, just silence. A row of rooms where everyone pretends to be asleep because hearing each other is too intimate. You approach a small stoop where a girl, maybe 16, sits in a coat too big for her frame. She's peeling a potato slowly with a table knife, catching the slices in her bonnet. She eyes you as you pass, then looks back down at her work. Beef stew tomorrow, she mutters. Or pretend beef. Depends what I find. You smile faintly. I'm rooting for the cow. She snorts, not unkindly. You move on. At the end of the block, a man is arguing with his own front door. You don't catch all the words, but the phrase "I paid last week" is repeated several times. A woman leans out of a third-story window and tosses him a key. He catches it without looking and mutters, "Still got it to no one in particular." There's something comforting about this domestic chaos. It's familiar, unscripted, not theatrical. Just London being London. You pass a public notice board where scraps of paper flap like overworked flags. Lost one grey cat. Answers to maybe. Room to let. Must provide own window. If you borrowed my boots, kindly return them. Or at least the left one. You tack up nothing, but you read them all. Because sometimes the best stories are told by people who never wrote them down properly. You reach a corner where a man is painting something onto the pavement in chalk. Letters, not art. Just one sentence repeated over and over. They never found her. He looks up. His eyes are clear. His hands are steady. He says nothing. You say nothing back. You just keep moving. Past the bakers with the broken shutter. Past the cobbler who keeps forgetting to close. Past the gas lamp that flickers like a thought about to be lost. And then unexpectedly, a patch of green. A park. Small, fenced in, barely bigger than a courtyard, but filled with benches, hedges, and one statue of a man on a horse who never actually visited London. The gate is unlocked. You step inside. The grass crunches underfoot. Frost. You find a bench and sit. No one else here. Not tonight. The statue above you has a plaque that reads "To Progress" and the power of steam. You exhale, fogging the air. "Seems steam's doing fine," you whisper. It's us who keep sputtering. And there, in the quiet, the faint sound of a piano. Far off. Maybe the same one as before. Maybe not. It doesn't matter. You listen, and let the frost settle around your ankles. Because for a moment, just a moment, you're not a body trudging through history. You're part of it. You stay on the bench longer than you mean to. It's that kind of quiet, the kind that tempts you to stop moving just for a minute, and then quietly dares you not to get up again. The park is so still. It almost doesn't feel like London anymore. There's no shouting, no coughing, no wheels clattering past in defiance of sleep. Just the soft drip of thawing frost from the iron railings and the creak of bare branches overhead. But eventually the cold finds your spine, and you rise again, joints stiff like rusted hinges. Your boots crunch back onto the cobbles. The city doesn't acknowledge your pause. It just keeps breathing around you indifferent. You move west now toward a part of London known for something both unavoidable and invisible servants. You start to notice the signs. The houses grow taller. 5 stories. 6. Windows are lit not with firelight, but with gas chandeliers. You see the polished brass door knockers, the boot scrapers, placed just so the servant bells mounted beside the threshold. But where the owners live upstairs in feathered nightcaps and warmed sheets, the real work hums beneath your feet. You pass a servant's entrance, half door sunk below street level, shadowed and narrow. It's slightly ajar, just enough for you to hear the clink of dishes being stacked, the soft murmur of scolding, the shuffle of slippered feet, too tired to be urgent. Being a servant in Victorian London is less a job and more a lifestyle audition. You live where you work. You sleep under stairs in basements, on cots in corners. You wake before your employer and go to bed after them. Your hands stay red, your back aches, and your only vacation is the few minutes you spend walking back from the butcher with the wrong cut of meat. Historians paint 2 pictures, one of loyalty and advancement, the other of exploitation and silence. Some servants stayed in one house for life, trusted and well-fed. Others flitted between homes like smoke, dismissed for looking the wrong way or sneezing too loudly. Scholars remain divided on whether domestic service offered dignity or merely disguised dependency. You pass another grand house where a maid is out scrubbing the front step with icy water and a bristle brush. She doesn't see you. She's focused, shoulders hunched, hands raw. Her cap has slipped sideways. Her knuckles are bleeding slightly. She stops for a second to suck on her fingers, then resumes scrubbing without a word. You glance up and see the silhouette of her mistress in the upstairs window, silk robe lit pipe, lace curtain twitching. The maid keeps scrubbing. A coach rattles past its lanterns, flickering gold against the dark windows. Inside, a man leans against the glass, drunk or dreaming. His top hat sits on the seat beside him like it's had a longer day than he has. You hear the clatter of iron again, and follow it to the back of a different house where the kitchen doors are open and someone's wrestling with an oven tray bigger than your torso. The cook shouts something about the goose being too dry. A boy, likely the scullery lad, nods solemnly and continues chopping onions so old they might sue for retirement. You walk on. You pass a group of girls in aprons gathered around the back of a bakery, sharing a crust of bread and a scandal. One says something in a whisper. Another gasps and slaps her arm. They all dissolve into giggles before going back inside. They don't see you watching. That's the trick of service. You're either completely visible or entirely invisible, never anything in between. You round a corner and find yourself on a Mews street, a tidy lane lined with stables turned into carriage houses, now turned into tiny flats for the lucky or the loud. Once upon a time, this was where coachmen lived above the horses they cleaned. You pass a stable still in use, the smell of hay mixing with the richer tang of manure and polish. A groom brushes a restless mare, murmuring to her like she's the only creature who's ever understood him. Maybe she is. Not far off, a group of footmen loiter beneath a gas lamp uniforms, unbuttoned hair damp from steam or sweat. One of them lights a cigarette and nods in your direction. Out walking, he asks. You nod. Lucky you, he mutters. Some of us still got tables to set. Another chuckles. Or boots to blacken. They don't sound bitter. Just tired. One of them points at your boots. Yours could use a shine. You look down and laugh. They could use a priest. That gets a chuckle. They move on. So do you. Further west you pass a row of boarding schools, their gates tall, and locked their windows glowing with late-night lamplight. Somewhere inside a young servant, possibly 12, is likely sweeping the hearth, while the daughters of merchants copy Latin verbs and dream of being married by 20. You remember once long ago pretending to be one of them, standing outside the gate in a clean dress, reciting lines from a borrowed book, hoping someone would invite you in. No one did, but you learned the words anyway. You round the final bend in this district and find a narrow alley filled with drying laundry on ropes slung between windows. A black dress, a white apron, a pair of bloomers waving like surrender flags. Servants' quarters. Above you in the big houses, someone yawns beside a fire and rings a bell. Below the maid, sighs, sets down her tea and stands up again. You walk on boots softer now, the street quieter, the bells still echoing faintly behind you. Because in this city, comfort is always built on someone else's effort. And the hands that build it rarely get warm. The sky hasn't been truly dark for hours. It's that strange late-night phase where the fog begins to pale, but the sun isn't brave enough to rise yet. The gas lamps flicker with less confidence, and the shadows on the cobblestones blur like watercolours left out in the rain. You've been walking so long your legs are moving out of habit, not intention. Every part of you aches with a dull, familiar weight. Even your thoughts are slow now, syrupy stretched. You'd sit, but you're afraid your body wouldn't let you stand again. So you keep drifting forward down streets where even the cats have gone to bed. You pass an alley you've seen 100 times, but this time there's movement, a flicker of fabric, a quick shuffle of feet. You pause. A figure leans against the wall in shadow, not threatening, just there. You approach cautiously. It's a woman, barefoot. Her dress is torn near the hem. She clutches a shawl too thin for the chill, and her face is red from wind and tears. She sees you, and she says the one word you were hoping she wouldn't. Help. She doesn't lunge, doesn't collapse, just asks quietly, softly, like she's already been told no, a dozen times tonight. You glance around. The street is empty. The buildings are silent. You step closer. She smells like soap and exhaustion. Her fingers are trembling. She clutches a bundle to her chest, rags a baby. No way to tell in the dark. You nod. She exhales, relief mixed with disbelief. And for a moment you're not two strangers anymore. You're two people trying to survive the same terrible story. You guide her out of the alley toward the square. You remember a soup house that opens early not far from here. It's not much tea like dishwater and bread like bricks, but it's warm. She says nothing as you walk and you don't press her. Not everyone's ready to tell their story. Sometimes just being listened to without speaking is enough. You pass a man sweeping steps outside a fish shop. He nods at you both. He's seen worse. He's seen everything. At the corner, the soup house appears, a low squat building with peeling green paint and smoke rising lazily from the flue. A woman stands outside with a basket of spoons and a face like a well-worn prayer. She sees the two of you, and without a word steps aside. You help the girl inside. The warmth is immediate. It hits like emotion. The room smells like old potatoes and clean iron kettles. A few people sit slumped at tables, heads bowed over chipped bowls. The girl lets go of your arm and moves forward on her own. You watch her sit. Someone places a bowl in front of her. Another presses a tin cup of tea into her hands. Still, she says nothing. But she eats, and you know you did the right thing. You slip out quietly, not needing thanks. Not needing to see the ending, you walk into the fog again. The streets feel different now. Not brighter, but less heavy. And then for the first time tonight, you do something strange. You stop. You stand in the middle of the road and just look up. There are no stars. London doesn't allow them, but the sky is beginning to shift. Not dawn yet, but near. A quiet murmur of pigeons rises from a rooftop. Somewhere a clock chimes softly. 5 bells, or maybe 6. You've lost count. You stretch your arms over your head, bones cracking like an old book opening to the middle. You think about beds, about warmth, about the softness of not being on your feet. You deserve rest. But rest doesn't always come with a blanket. Sometimes it's just the quiet certainty that for once you made a choice that mattered. You take one last deep breath, tasting smoke and damp stone, and the faintest trace of rosemary from someone's window box. And then, with every step slower than the last, you start heading back. Back toward whatever space you call yours. Back toward whatever version of morning this city will allow. Because you've survived Victorian London for another day. And you're not done yet. The city is changing. Not quickly, not loudly, but unmistakably. The fog still hangs like laundry across rooftops, but the edges of it glow ever so slightly now, just enough to hint at sunlight. Gas lamps flicker and die, one by one, their duty done for the night. You hear shutters creak open, a kettle clatter to life behind a window pane, and a woman humming as she pulls bread from a brick oven. It's morning in Victorian London. Barely. And you're still upright. Your boots are 2 shades darker than they were when you started. Your hands are grimy. Your shoulders ache. But you made it through the whole night, and in this city that's no small thing. You pass a baker's stall opening early, the scent of yeast and ash puffing out onto the street like steam from an offering. A child runs past with a loaf under one arm and a giggle too quick to catch. You're not sure if he paid. No one chases him. Maybe no one minds. Ahead, a woman shakes out a rug over a railing. The dust falls like mist. She nods to you. You nod back. No words, just acknowledgement between survivors of another long London night. You pass a lamplighter dousing the last flames of the road. His pole clinks against the glass housing, and you swear you see a smile under his soot-marked cheeks. He hums something familiar. A lullaby, maybe. Or a hymn. And then you see it. Your street. Worn, narrow, tired, but yours. You pause at the edge of it. There's something sacred about returning to a place that waited for you. You pass the butcher unlocking his gate. He yawns without apology. You pass the seamstress pouring water from her window. She doesn't see you. You pass your own door still closed, still creaking slightly in the wind. You press your palm to it and exhale. Inside the room is still cold, still bare, but it smells like you. Damp wool, stale tea, and something softer hope maybe, or just familiarity. You light the stub of a candle and collapse into the chair by the fire that hasn't been lit in 2 days. Your feet scream, your back sighs, your eyelids flutter. No bells, no footsteps, no fog in here. You take the newspaper from your coat, the one with the drawing, the mudlark with the spoon. You set it beside you like a talisman, and you let yourself drift. Not into dreams, into quiet, because now, at last, you can rest. The city is still moving outside your walls. A carriage passes softly. A rooster calls from some distant rooftop where he probably doesn't belong. Someone knocks over a bucket and swears under their breath, but all of that feels far away now. You've earned this stillness. The kind of silence that isn't empty but earned stacked brick by brick through 1,000 tiny survivals. You feel it in your legs, your chest, your fingertips. The candle glows beside you, its light small but unwavering. The room is dim but safe. You close your eyes and let your breath slow. There is no more mud to step in, no more soot to swallow, no more fog curling into your collar. Just a wooden chair, a patchy floor, a warm patch of wool draped over your legs. You imagine the Thames still, and quiet now its surface smooth. You imagine the woman at the soup house stirring her pot with one last flick of the wrist. You imagine the chimney boy asleep in a corner, soot still on his face. You imagine the girl from the alley holding her tea between steady hands. You imagine the city breathing out. Finally, you feel your body sinking, your thoughts softening at the edges. You're not alone. You're part of something massive and messy and miraculous, a city that never rests even when you do. And as you drift off, know this. You made it through the longest night. You walked every step. You endured every sound, every shiver, every strange kindness and hard truth. And now, you sleep. The candle flickers once, then stills. End of script. Sweet dreams.